Good evening, Happy New Year and welcome. My name is Adam Block and I call this meeting to order. I'm the chair of the Dedham Planning Board, and this meeting of the Planning Board is being conducted in a hybrid manner consistent with state regulations and is being recorded. Public access to this meeting does not necessarily ensure there will be public participation unless required by law. If there are members of the public here tonight that like to address some of the issues on our agenda, in particular dealing with planning for the May and perhaps October town meeting, I certainly would welcome an opportunity for the public to participate this evening. For the record, I will now confirm attendance of planning board members. When I call your name, please respond that you are present. Paul Alpert. Here. So I note, although Paul may be off camera, he is here. Artie Crocker.
Here.
Jean McKnight.
Here.
Good.
And I've just confirmed the reason Paul is off camera is he can't take part in the first hearing.
Well, right, it's I'll come
Yeah,
to that
I
after.
just
Thank you.
know one.
Yeah, wasn't there yet, but I appreciate that. Natasha I spoke to last night and anticipated her being here tonight, so we'll mark her present when she arrives. From the planning board department, our staff, Lee Newman.
Present.
And Alex Lee.
Present.
Happy New Year to you both. Thank you very much for 2022 and in anticipation of a big year ahead. We have some exciting things that we want to move forward with, and it's going to take a lot of effort from a lot of people. For those participating in this meeting, please be aware that anything you state or share will be a matter of public record, and others may be able to see you. All supporting materials for this meeting, including the agenda, are available on the town's website at needhamma.gov unless otherwise required. The ground rules for this meeting are designed to allow for an accurate public record. I will introduce each of the speakers in our agenda. After they conclude their remarks, board members will be asked for any comments, questions, or motions. We have additional ground rules governing public participation, which I'll review if any members of the public wish to speak tonight. And I suddenly see that we do have a good number of people present online. And for those that have just arrived, given that tonight we're discussing some actionable items for potential zoning change in May and perhaps October, tonight I will allow public participation. So with that, the first on our agenda is our appointment at 7:05 with attorney George Genta Jr., who's representing a developer, Jay Dorenzo, who's looking to redevelop the property located at 888 Great Plain Avenue in Needham. And before I ask George to begin, for the record, our colleague Paul Alpert has recused himself from the discussion of this item because I think his office represents an abutter to an abutter. So he is recused this evening. So George, at this point, I'd like to turn it over to you if you're able to share your screen.
Indeed.
And
Question for George. I see Dominic here, who I've tried to move over, but I don't see Jay Dorenzo, who you told me.
Yes, I heard from Jay late this afternoon that he likely would not be able to actually log in. He was going to try, but in all likelihood, he said he probably wouldn't be able to do it.
And before you begin, just for the record, I note that Natasha Spada is present. George.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to share my screen. Start off with this. So it's been almost a year, a little less than a year, since the last time we had a conversation about this property and potential rezoning. And so given the amount of time that has passed by and the fact that we have a new planning board member since then, I think I'll give a little recap as to what we're dealing with and what sort of the situation is and why we're making this effort. So as you can see on the screen here, the red parcel or the parcel denoted by a red color, this is the subject property. This is 888 Great Plain Avenue. It is adjacent on two sides to the center business district, on what would be the right side of the property here, and then on the back of the property here. And then along this side, what is in yellow is technically zoned single residence B, but is occupied by, in the first instance, the Christian Science Church, and then the second instance, the Baptist Church. So they are effectively sort of institutions or long-term institutional buildings. So because of the fact that this lot is zoned as single residence, but has been used for nearly 40 years for commercial use, namely originally it was Hillcrest Gardens, and then Mr. Dorenzo has since kept that going in sort of bits and pieces, fits and starts, basically for a commercial nursery or commercial gardening center. It's technically non-conforming, but to continue that use or to use the property the way it is currently zoned doesn't seem to make much logical sense, given that it is bounded on two sides by Center Business District, Commercial District, and on the remaining sort of side by what is institutional use that is nothing like single-family residential. So, and in this instance, property is unique throughout the downtown area. The only other properties that are even close would be the properties that are on Pickering Place, but they aren't similarly situated in that while they have St. Joseph's Church, or some of them have St. Joseph's Church behind them, they're not adjacent to any commercial zone. They have the Verizon building is sort of on the other side, but it's not actually zoned commercial. So this lot stands out as a unique instance, unlike any other property in the downtown area, any other property adjacent to the center. So for that reason, and given the surrounding uses and the current zoning, it seemed to make sense to rezone the property for some other use. We feel the most logical thing to do would be to extend the Center Business District and the Center Business District overlay to include this property. We have had discussions in the past about extending that all the way up to Warren Street. Our perspective is whether that makes sense or not, we are not advocating for that because we can see that there is a distinction to be made between the institutional type uses in the Christian Science Church and the Baptist Church with respect to the uses and more notably with respect to their buildings. So we are not advocating for that. We are limiting it just to this one particular parcel because it is so uniquely situated. So we are trying to rezone it to include it in the Center Business District and include the overlay, and also make a couple of other zoning changes in order to allow for redevelopment. And switch now, go to a different screen. And just to, again, sort of help you orient. And you can kind of see here a little better. This is from the GIS. The red again is our property. The blue here, this is Center Business District. And actually, and I want to point out, you see this, how this has got this little leg that comes out here? That is a piece of this property here, the 60 Dedham Avenue building, and is not legally a part of the municipal parking lot. So one of the things that we've discussed in the past is trying to get access to the back of the property. But unfortunately, it would require crossing over a private piece of property, as well as a town piece of property, as well as the complete reconfiguration of that parking lot, which right now has different understandings and agreements with both this building, the 60 Dedham Ave building, and also the church buildings, because it provides access to the parking in back here.
That's a Cox building, correct?
This one is here, yes.
And did you make any effort to reach out to the owners of the Cox building?
We haven't had any real discussions with them, but I did push around a little bit with the title to see sort of what the situation is. And it would require not only their agreement, but we would have to get agreement of town meeting as well.
Because of the municipal law.
Exactly.
Right.
And because of the current arrangements with respect to that lot.
And have you, were you able to have any conversations with town council at all about to potentially do that?
Pleasure. We did not explore, we didn't go down that line because it seemed like that would be a dead end and we didn't want to dig too far down that line.
a dead end because of the issue. of town
Be-
meeting?
because of the issue, because of the different issues, essentially you would have to get 4 different parties on the same page, including one of which would be town meeting, and 3 of which are private parties. And you'd have to do a complete redesign of that parking lot.
Which of the 3 private parties? Obviously, the
The Cox,
Lorenzo,
the Cox building, the 2 churches, and the town,
because that parking lot also services the church.
exactly,
Both
provides
churches.
access to the back, right?
And those
Right.
are residential units on Dedham Ave, also adjacent to it, right? But I know
Right.
they don't use it, but there are residential.
Right, yeah, this is, I believe, a 2-family here.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that they have any rights with respect to the parking lot.
No, they
They're-
don't, no,
they're
I don't
separate.
think so.
How is that parking lot next to the church right now allocated as far as rights, lease and so forth? That area right there.
So I can't speak to the full allocation of that, but my understanding is that this is used, I believe it's used either it's exclusively by one, or it might be shared by the 2 churches.
But who owns the property right there?
This one, I think the property is actually owned by.
We can come back. to
I
that.
think the property is owned by the Christian Science Church, maybe.
We can subsequently confirm that. I apologize that I don't want to get too far away from your presentation.
And you know, we are still open to trying to go down that road if, you know, if that's something that is an absolute, desire. But considering the odds of success are relatively low, and by relatively low, I mean pretty darn low. It just didn't seem to make too much sense to go down that path. All right, so, so now that you've sort of be oriented, let me show you what we're at in terms of a current design. Unfortunately, it's not letting me zoom in, but you
You're
can see.
way within the large screen now.
Wait a minute, actually,
No, I mean, maybe, but not that we're.
let me try this another way. Try this another way. And while I'm opening this up a different way, I will tell you that basically, we've been before you with, I think so far, 3 different designs. And each time we've come back, we've tried to incorporate the suggestions and address concerns that the board has raised. And so this one addresses some of the comments and concerns that came up at the last discussion. Right, so there you can see the sort of graphical rendering to show better. So some of the comments we had at the last discussion were, when we presented, we had a 3-story building at that point, and we were given feedback that we should consider potentially a 4-story building. So we have done that. We've added the story on in order to add additional units. We were asked to incorporate sort of some traditional ridge lines to, basically fit in more with the sort of traditional views, traditional appearance of some of the buildings in the downtown area. So we've done that with the ridge lines in the front there. You can see that carry over on the side. It's essentially a gambrel style roof-ish on that 4th floor, not unlike what was done around the corner on Dedham Avenue, except that we've got the gable ends incorporated as well. And one of the things that we've done, and let me just go now to next sheet.
So it's 4 stories, but it's really 3 stories on a roof
It's
line.
3 plus 1. Okay. And so one of the other things,
Sorry, just to be clear, that's 4 stories of occupancy.
right,
Yes.
right. And one of the other things we incorporated is our original design had the building right up sort of on the sidewalk. And there was concerns about having the entrance to the garage not having enough area, enough visual lines with respect to cars going in and out. So we have pulled the entire building back. So the building is now set back 20 feet. And what that does is it gives basically a car length. So it gives that the visual lines to be able to see going in and out of the garage. And then it also allows us to put in a patio or pedestrian sort of landscaped area in front here that, depending upon who we wind up with for tenants, if a restaurant, for example, were ever to go in, this would be an area where they could put some outside seating. If no restaurant, then it could be a sort of an area very much like what has been done with the street that used to go between the old Jacobs block and the Graymont building. So with some planters and benches and things like that, and make it sort of a pedestrian seating area. All right, so that was a big, so the addition of the story and pulling the building back and changing sort of the overall aesthetic were the three big changes from the last version that you saw.
And
Right.
is it still 20 feet from the side yards?
So this is actually 25 feet over here.
What was it before?
There was one
Uh,
that seemed closer to.
There was one that was like, I think, 10 or 12,
Yeah.
and then there was one that was 20, and now it's 25. Right, and so, there's a couple of bits of zoning relief or zoning change that would be necessary to allow for this building or a similar building to be built. The ones right off the top are extending the center business district and the overlay to include this property. And then the other one, which I read, this is why I raised this, is right now in the neighborhood business district, as the board knows, there's a provision that allows the board to grant a special permit to reduce the side yard setback adjacent to a residential district from 50 feet down to 20 feet. So we would need that provision that is now in place in the neighborhood business district extended to the center business district. And then that would allow for a setback of 20 feet, although, as I said, we're showing 25 feet here. So we're actually more than that, but that provision would need to be incorporated. And then one of the other changes, and probably the other big significant change that we would need, is right now under the overlay, mixed use development in the center business district is capped at 18 units per acre. And we have suggested that if a development has at least 12.5% affordable, that cap be removed. Right now, in the center business district overlay, 10% affordability is required. So this would be providing more than the minimum that's required under the bylaw. And therefore, that we feel would justify taking off the cap. Now, it would also make sense in that if you look at what we've got proposed for a building.
You mean, you by cap, you mean a floor, but it's really a ceiling.
Right, cap, ceiling, right, same.
But it's really not a ceiling, it's a floor, right?
No, it's a limit. It's a hard
You
limit.
can't have more than
Then 18 units, 18 units. Oh, okay, the 18 units per acre is the limit.
Right.
12.5 would be the
Floor,
floor, right,
exactly.
that's right, that's
Yeah.
right. Right, so right now, this building, basically, other than the setback, the 20-foot setback that I just mentioned, this building complies or is very close to complying with all the dimensional and density rules. So in the center business district overlay, with a special permit, you can do a building with an FAR of 2.0. This building is right around 2.0. We've got to work out some of the fine details. It's either just over or just under.
Including the affordable housing and not including the affordable housing.
Including the affordable housing, but not including any of the basement level. It is roughly 2,500 square feet over. 2,500 square feet is roughly the size of one of the larger affordable units. Certainly 2 affordable units. We're actually proposing 5 affordable units. So that would bring us certainly under the cap.
If you exclude the FAR from the affordable.
Right, which under the overlay you can do. But then we have to add back in some of the basement space that's not used for parking, which is something that should probably,
If it's used for human occupancy.
which includes storage, mechanicals. Right, so it's one of these things we have to do the full calculations to see that we take some out and then we add some back in. But we're close so that basically this building or just about this building can be built under the center business district overlay dimensional and density rules.
So how many units do you have in total?
We have 34 units total,
34 and five
five
them-
affordable.
5 of them being affordable.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And wasn't,
Which-
what was the plan before, 24, 22?
So the last version, I think, was 24 because it was 3 stories. And basically what we've done here is added a story. And by adding the story, of course, you gain, I think it's 2 affordable units. So this is part of why we also think that this is kind of a home run type project. Because it works for the private side, but it also provides 5 units of affordable housing. It also provides a number of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units in the downtown area, which even at not necessarily affordable rents is still more affordable for segments of the population that can't stay in Needham or can't move into Needham. It provides them that window, which in practical reality probably means a lot of retirees.
Can you show us the floor plans one? Again, just because when I PDF'd it, I cut them off and instead parts of them. Thank you.
And these are the floor, so you want to see the actual,
Could the ground floor maybe send it?
the- that's the basement.
Right,
That's the ground floor.
and that's all retail.
So it is 3 units of retail here with 4 units of residential in the back. And these are actually the largest, I think, largest residential units back here. And so likely one of those would be an affordable unit and it would be fully handicap accessible. Obviously, the building would be handicap accessible because they have an elevator. There was the units, but that would actually be on the ground floor.
Right.
Where is the elevator in this plan? Is it next? Is it that
Yeah,
square
it
right
looks
there?
like that.
Yep.
That's where it
That
is.
square right there.
That's where-
And then the affordable units upstairs. Oh. You 1 or 2 bedroom, 1 bedroom?
So they would be split, I would, based on sort of rough calculations, it would seems like we would have 5 affordable units, and I think we'd probably end up having to do a breakdown of 1 3-bedroom, 2 2-bedrooms, 2 1-bedrooms. So they would be mixed in with the 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms, basically indistinguishable from the market rate units.
It's Great Plain here,
So Great Plains at the bottom,
running east-west,
this way,
Yes.
right along the front.
Right.
right? So the entrance to the parking lot
Is right in here.
underneath the unit.
It actually comes in and then the ramp goes down.
Yes,
And I'll point out too, you see this gray area here too?
yes,
So that's first floor space. And is basically open on the
second
above
floor.
that, second, third, and floor, plus 1 floor.
And what's beyond it? What's beyond that space?
What do you mean? You mean here?
Right there, right,
That's a residential unit,
okay, okay.
right? And we did that because then that provides, allows us to get more windows. And a little bit more sort of light and air into the units.
There's no floor plan in that area, and then on the corner on the southeast side of the building and in the middle
Right.
why is that?
I think that's just because these are conceptual plans. These aren't
Oh,
full workups. This
I
is,
see.
it's just to kind of give an idea, like,
I
I'm
see.
actually surprised they put that much for the other units in.
I see.
It's just to give an idea of how the units would be.
No, I was at both those meetings via Zoom, of course, or maybe even one in person. I don't ever remember anyone saying this plan, the building should be taller or bigger. I don't ever remember that ever being a comment at any of those meetings.
Well, and
Make
the
the
minutes are
building
included.
bigger.
The minutes were included in our packet.
Okay, and I just did a search for 4 stories and I didn't see anything in the minutes about it. But I don't remember any comments about make the building taller. I heard the comments of, push it back on the street, because it seemed unsafe. I had the comments about finding a way to access the back of it, and I understand that we're problematic to access. I don't ever remember anyone saying, make it bigger. And this is considerably bigger.
Well, I don't know that it was, my recollection, and of course, this is going back a year. But my recollection isn't that it was to make it bigger. It was to look at adding a story because the overlay allows for the 3+1. The comment was to look at adding that in to see how that played out with respect to the building and the units.
Well, is 3+1 normally considered, for example, the building behind, where the theater used to be, building on Dedham Ave, that's 3+1.
That's-
The fourth floor is pushed back from the street. Is that kind of a 3+1 where this is more of a straightforward?
No, I would say this is somewhat similar to that in
This
terms of,
isn't similar at all to that. The one in Dedham Ave has 3 stories, then the fourth story is pushed back considerably from the street.
But it's a flat roof, isn't it?
Yeah, I understand that.
This one is,
I'm saying,
Or tapered.
I'm saying it's 3 floors, then the fourth floor is pushed back from the street. So you don't easily see the fourth floor
You
from
do.
the street.
Let's go, why don't you call it up? I understand what you're saying.
yeah,
But why don't you call it up? Because is it 50 Dedham Avenue? Is the other building?
should be because the Cox building is 60, so.
Might be 40.
So I think it's, Jean, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I realize we're in a question and answer mode, and it's not so much that I have questions, but when we come to the time when it's appropriate for comments, I have comments.
Okay, George, are you otherwise? Is that your full presentation? Margaret, did you have anything you also wanted to add?
No, I'm just here
Say hello.
to say hello. To see everyone.
Yeah, so I do want to kind of go back to and finish my thought, which is that, the whole thing with the 18 units per acre, that it makes sense to remove that cap or remove that limitation and have the dimensional and density limitations control what you do for a building. It is in the center business district and the overlay, you're allowed to do a building of 1.0 FAR by right. To go from 1.0 to 2.0 requires a special permit, and the board therefore has discretion with respect to whether to grant that. And I would say that with that, if the cap is removed, if you can do a building of a certain size and you are artificially capped at only doing, in this case, for example, 9 units, that would mean really probably 9 3-bedroom units, which is probably not the best thing for the downtown or for the town. It's probably better that there's more units with a mix of 1s and 2 bedrooms thrown in.
Right.
So that this is part of the thinking of, and especially if you connect it to an increase in affordable units over the 10% minimum base, that if you bump up, then you remove the cap and you can do more units, and it's basically a net win for sort of everybody. The developer gets more units, the town gets more affordable units, and it gets more units that are, well, not sort of affordable under the regulatory scheme, are affordable in the sense of people on the market side.
Can I ask you a question? How similar is this to 50 Dedham?
50 Dedham was built under the rules of the existing zoning without any of these changes that George is talking about. So 50
Was it over-
Dedham, 50 Dedham was built it was in Needham Center. It was built under the overlay rules. It was a 4-story building. And for the 4-story, there are actually 2 options. You can set the 4-story back, which is what I think was the option that was selected there, or the 4-story can be under a pitched roof. But that project was done basically under the existing rules that exist in the bylaw presently, without exception.
Well, exists presently, but the overlay was created for that purpose to create, and that was the only development that arose out of that zoning bylaw change then at the time. So
That's correct.
what's the difference then between the zoning relief that George is seeking for this and the zoning relief that was sought for the overlay district?
George is asking you to change the zoning so the project can go forward. So he's asking you to change the rule as it relates to, I think, the 50-foot setback, or provide a special permit to allow it to come down. That was not something that was necessary or required for the project at 50 Dedham. He's asking you to get rid of the cap on the number of units that one can construct per acre. The project on 50 Dedham did not seek that relief. It met that standard. I think he's also, I think you were also asking, Joe, I think you're proposing an increase across the entire district on the percentage of affordable units which would be required, going from 10, I think, to 12.5%. And I guess I'm a little confused about what you're requesting on the exemption from the floor area for the affordable units. Maybe you could clarify that.
Yeah, so Lee, that's actually something that is not required on further review. That was, that is actually, that provision is already in the overlay.
Right.
So it's actually not required. And that was when I was pulling together the different pieces. I was actually looking at the neighborhood business district where that, oddly enough, that provision does not apply. So you've got sort of different mechanisms
In different
districts, but they all try and achieve almost the same thing. So.
Well, I
So
think
that
in the
last
neighborhood,
one-
in the neighborhood business district, we wanted to set a fixed FAR and not allow the building to get any bigger than that base number. So which is why I think there was a different philosophy there.
And offhand, Lee, what's the FAR under the overlay district for 50 Dedham?
Well, the FAR in this district can go up to I think a 2.0 by special permit. I'd have to look at that project to see what they actually required. Alex, maybe you could pull up that special permit. It would be embedded in that.
Yeah, sure.
And George, you're looking for an FAR of 2.0
Right.
as well. And
Excluding well, is affordable housing excluded or included? Lee, under the existing bylaws, is affordable housing supposed to be including or excluded, or can it be excluded?
Yes, George is right. I didn't see that provision myself when I was reviewing it this morning, but he is right. There is a provision that excludes, basically it's under section 386, I think, paragraph A. It says the floor area of the affordable unit shall not be counted for purposes of determining the maximum floor area permitted under section 3843, which is the 2.0 that he's referring to. So yes, it was excluded in this district. He's correct. It wasn't excluded in the neighborhood business district.
But George, you actually said that you included it and still got the 2.0 plus the 2,500, right?
Right. If you include all the affordable units but exclude the entire basement,
Okay.
we're at like 2,500 square feet over what the cap would be at 2.0. So
I think-
25 is obviously not a lot in a building like this. So
I
if you took out the,
Go ahead.
we'd be below,
Without, you'd be below.
but we're close.
Okay,
I would say that at the time when we did the zoning and we created, the 10% number, we were thinking about what the exclusion would mean for the affordable units. I mean, I think we were doing it based upon, 10, the ratios that we were talking about.
well, when you're right below.
when you're
it.
right underneath it already, you're right. That's the
But if
setback,
when you're seeing both of them in the same plane,
Exactly.
this actually might look less because of the roof lines.
And the setback,
Right.
I think on 50
Yeah,
Dedham,
yeah. No,
I
I
think
understand
it's-
what you're saying.
I don't know if that's less than 10 feet.
On the 50 Dedham, or 40 Dedham is right, pretty much on the back of the sidewalk. So
Yeah, so-
then when you go up to that plus 1 story, it's the pullback is from the street. So it's, even if it's pulled back 10 feet, it's still going to be closer to the street than we're at, because we're 20 feet back
Yes,
from the street.
that's right. So I have a couple of comments and questions. If you're done, and I know that other colleagues do as well. A question had come up before. I don't offhand recall the answer to it. I believe it was our colleague Marty Jacobs who asked, how is this not spot zoning? Because we're extending relief to one site. Do you recall what the answer was?
Well, I can tell you my opinion on that, which is that it is not spot zoning. Because generally for spot zoning, it has to be something that is unrelated to a planning objective that benefits a single property
Yes,
owner.
correct.
Right, and in this case, because this is a property that is immediately adjacent to the center business district on two sides, is uniquely positioned being between commercial and institutional use. I think objectively, if you look at it from a planning perspective, I think pretty much everybody will agree that a single family house is not the appropriate use of that lot. And that right there means that it's not spot zoning, because it is a zoning to address an inconsistency between the current zoning and what the use of the lot should be.
I certainly recognize that before it was utilized as either, and I think we may have some distinctions here, either a non-conforming use or non-conforming structure when it was when they were selling agricultural products. And there would be commercial activity here, and yet it's right next to the residential district, and you're also providing not just a commercial mix consistent with the center business district. You're also adding 34 units of housing, which is consistent, with several things, certainly with Natasha and Jean and, in the housing plan, there is a high desire for, increased housing density. In fact, by right, this is really by special permit. We
The
intend,
MBTA communities.
correct, under the MBTA communities proposal, which the town would hope to adopt. It's consistent with those objectives. It's also consistent with our affordable housing objectives. It's not to say that it's perfect, because I think there is some significant concerns that have been expressed before. Some of the neighbors may not be so happy with that much residential. My preference with increased density and with multifamily activity is mixed use, because the best place to do it is along the transportation and commercial spine of the town, which this is consistent. And yet it still creates opportunities to diversify the commercial mix in the town. And I think I see that as also a benefit. And I also see it's a benefit because I do remember we were talking before about the sight lines for pedestrian vehicular traffic flow, and that you did push that back to maximize that. I think that was, that was effective and smart. And I understand that in order to achieve those objectives, changes would need to be made. Is this something that you're looking for the planning board on its own to sponsor? Is this something that you're looking to do as a citizen's petition?
So we would like to move forward in some form or fashion at the Springtown meeting coming up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
We would obviously like for the board to take it up and move it forward. But we are willing to do it as a citizen's petition as well.
Okay. So perfectly timed. Jean, you've been patiently waiting. Your hand is up. I know you've got comments. Let's hear it.
Yes. I appreciate that the building has been moved back to address what I thought was a very important issue with regard to visibility for autos, especially exiting the underground garage. But I want to discuss an entirely different concept for the use of this property. This is really a transition property between the central business district and the residential district. As are the church properties. They kind of serve as a transition between the commercial uses and the residential uses. In the housing plan, it is proposed that this parcel and the two church parcels be rezoned to apartment A1. And this district, where in our town already, we have developed under that zoning 4 developments, and one in particular I want to point out, but the 4 developments are Rosemary Lake Apartments, often referred to as the Petrini property, Rosemary Ridge Condominium, the Highlands off on Highland Avenue near the fire station, near the Heights Fire Station. Excuse me, that's not called the Highlands. That's called Webster Green. And the Highlands, which is next to St. Joseph's Church, which is primarily a townhouse community, although there are flats in that development. And particularly mention the Highlands because it also is adjacent to the business zone and is developed in a way that's a nice transition between the business zone and the residential areas. Now, this site is perfect for that zoning. The minimum lot size is 20,000 square feet. This site has 20,000 square feet. The minimum frontage is 120 feet. This site has 135 feet of frontage. It would allow given the maximum dwelling units per acre of 18, the same as we have for the Central Business District, it would allow 9 units. And presently, apartment A1 does not have an affordable housing requirement, but we certainly intend to introduce an affordable housing requirement as part of the rezonings for the, to comply with the MBTA Communities Act. The state is saying you can only have a requirement of 1 affordable units per every 10 units. However, there is a mechanism that they're setting up to apply to be able to have 12.5 units, which is, excuse me, 12.5% of the units affordable, which means 1 per 8 unit rather than 1 per 10 unit. And we are going to apply to have that permission to be able to use 12.5%. So that would mean if this were an 8-unit development, it would be 1 unit. We presently require averaging up. So if you had 9 units, you'd have to have 2 affordable. I think this is a good example of why we need to rethink that, because that would be burdensome. The front setbacks work 20 front, 20 rear, 20 side. That would be considered a residential use, so that you wouldn't have to worry about the 50-foot setback. And the limit is 3 stories at 40 feet. And that's what the housing plan proposes for this site. That's what I think should happen with this site. And I'm not in favor of expanding central business zoning to this site as proposed. I think that's pretty much my little speech about it.
Jean, can I ask you,
But that's where I see the future of this site and the church parcels as well. You never know what might happen with church parcels in the future. They may be similarly developed. And it could be done as a multi-story building with an elevator. It could be done as a townhouse development like the Highlands. But being across the street from a major park of our town, I think people in the community would welcome a development of that type.
Jean, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What do you see as the regulatory difference between the number of units being proposed by this development and under A1? In other words, other than the commercial on the first floor, how different is this in achieving the objectives of the A1 district?
Well, I think what I want to say is I'm not trying to match the Central Business District. because I really do see this as a transitional site. And it's not so much looking for the goal of the maximum number of residential units you can get on this site as having zoning that is appropriate to the area. I also don't want to forget to mention something. It's been said by Attorney Junta and also by Adam, I think you may have said this, and I disagreed at the last of meetings we had a year ago. It's my, I don't want to say opinion because I'm no longer a practicing lawyer. It is my point of view that this is not a prior non-conforming use. I think it is a prior non-conforming dimensionally. But I don't see in a way how that matters in this situation. Since I don't think the building actually violates the dimensions. And I don't think what's proposed would violate the dimensions, but I do not see this as a prior non-conforming use because it was a use allowed by right when it was established.
Thank you, Jim. Artie, do you have any comments or questions?
Just going back to, again, I looked at the notes, I don't see anything about 4 stories in them. Our
We
minutes.
asked them to look at density. The reason is to see what would make it viable to have more affordable units.
Oh, if I could respond, I think on that, I meant to respond on that because I think I'm the one who is, this is being attributed to. I did say, I am quoted in our minutes of the January 18th, 2022 meeting that were distributed with our packets. When I was focusing on driver visibility and the lack of a setback in the front, then I moved on and said I'd like to have that moved back, and whether it's possible to compensate by going up with the height in order to have that kind of a setback, and also if they don't get the 50-foot setback relief they were seeking, the 50 foot, and still apparently are seeking the relief from the 50-foot requirement of a setback for commercial uses from the residential zone. So I did say that at that time, at that meeting.
Okay. Yeah, as far as you had mentioned that the building's already 20 feet back, so that's like the 4th story is already set back from the road. It's still essentially flush with the front of the building. But I appreciate the fact that it's back. I like the fact that it's back from the road. I have concerns that much traffic is in this building coming out onto Great Plain Ave. And I think that's of concern, that much traffic coming out at that point in Great Plain Ave. Maybe any point in Great Plain Ave, but certainly that point in Great Plain Ave is concern for me. I haven't had anyone that's at this point is in favor of this type of density at that point. I mean, it's going from the 22-ish, 24-ish units that was at the meetings before a year ago, give or take a year ago, and that's what everyone was hearing. All of a sudden, it's a higher density. I appreciate the fact that density makes it easier to have for the developer. I can appreciate that fact. I really do. This, in my mind, this is too much. It's just simply too much.
So you would not support?
I would not support this particular project here. No, I don't think it meets what we're trying to accomplish with some type of transitional building. It's again facing the park. I just don't think it meets what we'd like to accomplish at that property. So I would not support this particular project, although I am in favor of the multi-use aspect, what he's trying to accomplish. I just would like to find it accomplished a different way.
How many units per acre is this proposed to be?
I almost hate to tell you, because it is a big number.
Yeah.
It's roughly 64 units
64
per acre.
units per acre. Right. And the minimum, Gene, that we're looking for, I think, is 18 to be consistent with the MBTA communities.
Yes, well, of course, the MBTA Communities doesn't care how high you go. They
No, no, I
want a
understand.
minimum of 15 units per acre. And our apartment A1 zoning, which we're using as our model, is and has been since it was instituted in the 1980s, 18 units per acre. So that's the model we're using.
All right, so,
But
thank
can I
you.
ask a question? But that's from the 1980s, right? So with the MBTA communities, what, I don't know if Lee or what typically what is being seen as changing for that density, if the last time we changed it was in 1980, right?
Well, when we did the Needham Center zoning, whether or not it still makes sense for the center business district and for the Chestnut Street Business District, we use the 18 units per acre. And so the building at, at 50 Dedham Avenue that was constructed under the new rules is done at that density. And I think earlier somebody asked what the FAR was for that. It's 1.8.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful information with the FAR. And that's helpful with the density. And then Natasha, it's your turn.
I guess, so I appreciate the setbacks. I know that we had talked about it was 10 feet and we were really concerned about it being so close to the road. So I appreciate that. And the setbacks on the side, because I remember one of them was 5 feet. I had a question about the, and I appreciate the amount of affordable units. And I know it's related to the 34 units, right? So I mean, it's kind of goes along with that. And so one question is, in general, is there a fence around the entire area, or is there an opportunity to, it seemed like it was all front facing. Is there an opportunity? I know there's fenced off areas for outdoor space within it, but is there a fence around the property line or is it open?
So I believe there's a fence on the, if you're looking at it from the front, along the right property line right now, there's a chain link fence there
Right.
because there's like a walkway that provides access to the back of the commercial block there. There's no fence. I don't think there's a fence on the left side. That's open, I believe. And in fact, the Christian Science Church has a walkway that goes from the sidewalk to the sort of the back of their property. And it visually, it almost looks like it's all sort of common. And then don't believe there's a fence on the back either.
Yeah, I was wondering if there would be some connection to that back, to the back parking area so that it could connect like, in an urban way, right? To the back, but
That's where it would be. That's where it would be, is that correct?
So, yeah, I mean, that's the underground. So
Right, but if it was above ground, that's the part of the
somewhere,
building that
right,
would connect.
somewhere back in that area.
right, just
But-
trying to figure out if they connect.
It'd have to be off to the left and left
It
of
would
that
have to
little
be
nook.
on this side.
And that'd be that side, it's gonna be the back.
So is there a connection like that so that it is, so I just like an urban, I actually, I like that it's mixed use. I like that it's a transition. I completely agree with Jean. It's a transition space. I like the fact that it's mixed use. If the height of it and the proportion of it didn't look that much different than some of the churches or the other buildings that are nearby. So to me, I don't have an issue with the density. I know we haven't changed any of it. I know it's a lot, and I mean, it's a lot, but it gives us 5 affordable housing units. So I think there's a huge benefit to that. I know we're in the middle of, we're putting this out. I understand your concern, Artie, but I think that we already have a building that's a precedent to it on the street. And if this is even set back even more, so it doesn't bother me. So I think this is a huge opportunity as a transition space. So
I agree.
that's where I'm coming from.
I agree. I think that that clearly continuity with the commercial, with the commercial activity on the first floor. And it also is a transition with, with density. Jean is talking about ultimately seeing high density in the 2 other properties next door to 2 churches, in the fullness of time. And either way, it's still residential and it's achieving a number of municipal benefits. I see that we have some members of the public that would like to speak, so I just want to set a little bit of reset some of the ground rules.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I
Jean.
clarify one point? because it is relevant, and that has to do with one more aspect of apartment A1, and that is the floor area ratio. It is a floor area ratio of 0.5. Whereas I think we were talking about a floor area ratio of 2 for this site somehow. And it is 0.5. And if I have done my math right, that would mean you could have 8 1,300 square foot units developed on the site at that density. Just want to clarify that.
Thank you very much for the clarification. So for members of the public that are participating tonight, we ask that you state your name and your address for the record. Please address your remarks through the chair. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. We also ask that to be able to get to as many people and to also continue with our other agenda items, not to repeat the same point that someone else may have raised, just to say I agree with the previous speaker is helpful enough. We'll allow you to speak a second time if there are no additional speakers. Your questions may not necessarily be able to be answered in the moment, although we'll do our best if we're able to easily answer those. Otherwise, we'll be happy to provide additional information after our meeting tonight. Your own observations are particularly helpful. And for those of you that are unable to speak tonight, but would like to provide comment, we encourage you to do so. Our email address is planning@needhamma.gov. That email address is planning@needhamma.gov. And for this item, if you just want to say in the subject matter 888 Great Plain Ave, that would be simple enough. The first person I see tonight that would like to speak is Oscar Mertz. Oscar, we'd like to welcome you. We're going to elevate you to a panelist and appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. George and Chairman and Planning Board and distinguished Dorenzo team, George. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's nice to see advancing the design. I think there are some things architecturally that are definitely improvements. I would probably call that a mansard, not a gambrel. If we're getting technical, but basically, I think it does do what Natasha is talking about. So I agree with a lot of the comments. I will respectfully not agree with my colleague Jean on this as necessarily a good fit for A1. I think the challenge is with A1, and this is something we're discussing and will be discussing further with its application. It is pretty suburban. Frankly, a 0.5 FAR is pretty suburban, 18.8, and I think that's going to become a challenge for us. And I think that we have to be very careful with the use of dwelling units per acre, because I think nowadays everything's smaller, more smaller units. We're looking at workforce, so the units per acre, just throw it out. Frankly, 64 doesn't bother me. I think exactly what George said. Let the containment, the constraints of the building massing determine what you can build, and then inside that envelope, the concern is the envelope. The concern is how you experience the building. And yes, I agree, traffic and where you enter with cars is critical. But basically, a unit per acre is just a throw it out. It depends on the time of wherever we are in our development cycles. So I think the one question I'd like to ask George, Mr. Chairman, is to give me the square footage, the total housing square footage from a year ago and the total square footage now, because I gather it's probably gaining, but not as dramatically as the number of units, because I think you're basically getting smaller units now, if I'm reading this right.
So Oscar, George is looking through to come up with that if he's not able to easily.
Okay, so another comment while he's looking. I think I would really still urge with Artie's comments and all of our comments about the access of cars in and out from Great Plain, I think it would still be worth pounding the pavement and working out a way to get in from the rear. Because I think ideally that side entry to the residential is a little awkward. Maybe that could be a nice garden down there, but you'd love to have that residential entrance, the common entrance to the residential come to the street and not have a garage door on Great Plain. So it would be a better project to get the garage in the back, get down into parking, figure out a way to get through there, and then have a nice lobby experience. It might be a little more urban, as Natasha was saying, where you could really feel like the building has an address on Great Plain, not down the side, because the side could be really nice for some units. Anyway,
Oscar, I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So if the driveway came along the side of the building, I think we would lose that kind of landscape area on the side and would basically become almost entirely impervious.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the garage entrance should be off the back, not down the side. I'm saying the pedestrian residential entry is halfway down the side of the building facing Christian Science. That's weird to me. I would love to see the garage entrance move to the back and bring the residential pedestrian entrance to the street. That's what I meant by residential entry along the side. Sorry. The pedestrian residential entry would be nice to have in front. Closer to.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do you have an
Okay,
answer?
so the last iteration, the residential 24 units at 27,780 square feet.
27,000.
Yeah.
27,780.
That was the previous.
Previous, yeah.
And 22 units,
24 units.
24 units. Yep.
And the current, I don't have it separate.
We don't need to waste time on this, George. If you want to just send it in or something later, that's fine.
We could maybe update the packet. That's fine.
It was just an observation that I think it might be. Since you pulled the building back, that's my sense, is that you've just pushed your square footage vertically instead of spreading it out on a larger footprint.
Well, no, I think the square footage this time, if the last time was 27 for the living space for the rentals, it's maybe closer to 33,500.
So we'll get clarity on that. At this time, Oscar, I'm going to say thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
I'd like to bring in Joe Leghorn, if we're able to do that. Thanks again, Oscar, and Joe, if you could say your name and address for the record again, that will be helpful. Joe, we can't see you or hear you. You seem to be muted.
Unmuted video.
There you go.
Oh, here we go. Okay. So I'm really one of those people who is in the process. And it seemed to me this came up a year ago. And we're now rushing forward to deal with the warrant for May town meeting. And there are lots of questions here that probably deserve attention that, frankly, I would kick over at least till the fall to explore. One of the questions I have too is that I remember, like, my good friend Gene, in connection with the purchase of the acreage along the river, talked about that 10% is the goal when you were selling units as opposed to rental units. So from going 10 to 12, I presume that these are units, these will be units for sale as opposed to rental units. Am I right or wrong?
If you'd like me to respond to that, I will. I must have been misunderstood. There is no distinction in requiring a certain percentage of affordable units between condominiums and rental developments. It's the same standard. And in some of our zones, we do require 12.5%. But I'm reminded that in our downtown, we have, which we established about 16 years ago, we only required the 10%. So.
Okay. So the question is, what constitutes downtown? Having been involved with the development next to the Congregational Church, which I think is 25% affordable units on a rental or otherwise basis, maybe just out of downtown. Why should we make an exception here in a transition property to go to a lower number of affordable units? Wouldn't it be better to apply the same 25% to this?
Mr. Chairman, I can also respond to that, but perhaps you can as well on the difference.
Jean.
Yeah, the property next to the Congregational Church was developed by under what's referred to as a friendly 40B. The town no longer is required to approve developments under state law, chapter 40B, because we've reached a subsidized housing inventory that's at 10% of our housing units in our town. But the Zoning Board of Appeals still has the authority to grant comprehensive permits if the select board opens the gate and says, yes, go ahead, zoning board. And in this case, it did. And the typical standard under general laws chapter 40B is that 25% of the units have to be affordable to households at or below 80% of median income. And that's because what 40B does is it just waives all the requirements of your local zoning. And that's, you have to have 5%. So here we're talking about what do we require under our local zoning. And we would never require 25%. We would just consider that it was economically not feasible.
Right, that's what the planning board might consider, but what might town meeting consider? And my concern is with regard to the timing. We're in January, we need to go forward with this, proposals, public hearings, and we're backed up to town meeting. I would suggest to the proponent that if you really want to pursue this in an informed way, to postpone this at least to the fall town meeting. Because I think that there will be significant resistance to dealing with this in May, given what appears to be, in my opinion, and Gina, as an ex-lawyer, I still offer my personal opinions, is an attempt to ram this through on a timing basis.
I
So,
appreciate your comment is made and understood. Do you have anything else?
no, that's fine. Thank you.
Joe, thank you very much. George, do you have any other comments, or Margaret, do you have any other comments or questions for us?
I do have one thing. I wanted to respond a little bit to Jean's comments
Yes.
with respect to applying the A1 district to
Mhm.
this site. And I certainly understand the logic. And part of the reason why it's been a year since we were last before you, one was because the board had its hands full with the Muzzy project. And another reason was because the housing committee was working on doing the plan. So we wanted to give that time to evolve. However, in applying the A1 to this site, I think what you would likely get would be a maximum of 8 units. So you'd get 1 affordable units, 8 units, you probably would have all surface parking. So you're going to get a fundamentally different look and feel project. And that may be what the board and the town maybe wants, but from my perspective, as somebody who grew up in town and lived in town until not that long ago, I don't think that that would be the appropriate use for the site. I certainly can understand Artie's concerns about the size and whether it should be maybe 3 stories instead of 4. But I think that still a mixed use development for this site is more appropriate than having, for example, 3 2-unit buildings with surface parking and basically a small townhome type development, kind of like what is on Dedham Avenue that was done with the reconstruction of non-conforming 2-family and 3-family further down the street from 60. I think, that sort of thing wouldn't exactly fit visually in this spot because you now have, it's basically a project that's between, a commercial block, which hopefully eventually will get redone at a larger size, and a church building that is larger. So I think it just doesn't fit sort of visually overall, and I don't think that would be the best use for the property. But I certainly respect Jean's opinion, and I understand what she's saying with respect to transition.
I think that Oscar's comment about A1 and looking again at A1 in certain areas may not be a necessarily an appropriate fix in every location like this, for instance. I think ultimately we're looking to achieve a similar objective. And the board will have to consider whether we can put this on our agenda and go through the hearing process in enough time, and given the other items that we want to advance through the town meeting process. I know that in October, if there are certain things that the housing plan working group, certain initiatives that we can take up and advance in October, that may become a heavier meeting, because I think we're probably going to need a little more time before we can actually start taking off the larger substantive elements from the housing plan and actually adopt them in the next 4 months. So really 3 months. So we have some work to do to figure out what we're going to do with our schedule. Do you intend to also speak with the select board about this or any other town committees?
So we have previously had sort of informal working group sort of discussions with the select board.
Yes.
And given the change in membership, we
Yes.
would likely have further conversations with them as
Okay,
well.
very good. I think that's helpful. Unless there's anything else from my colleagues.
No,
I'd like to get to the next
there's a
agenda
few
item.
things that haven't been, at least one main thing that hasn't been addressed yet, and that is, so on the plans, you talk about, landscaping. Obviously, let's be realistic, we're not talking grass. So I have concern about, there's a tremendous lack of green space in this property. Tremendous lack of green space. That landscaping is not green space. This is a small fraction of it would be. That means from a total project standpoint, this has a far cry under. I think what I'd like to see, I think what the board even many times like to see for green space in the projects going forward. This is tremendously lacking in green space. And so I don't know what can be done about that. As far as except for reducing the building size. As far as the size of the buildings, I think this property would be taller than the Christian Science building next to it. Taller than that. And also, if we're talking about the project in Dedham Ave, that 3+1, that is not next to a residential district. That is next to the Cox building, and in between the building on the corner of Dedham and Great Plain Ave. So but they're not the exact same scenario next to it, where it's going to be, a residential style district. I understand there are churches there right now. I understand that's what's going on now. I understand that, but it's not the same thing at all. That's in the middle of business. This is not in the middle of business. It is visually a completely different thing going on. It is opposite a park. That visually gives meaning to what should be there as well. We're taking a lot which is 80% grass, 85% grass, let's say, maybe not more than 90, but 85% grass. And we're taking almost all that is going to be gone. Almost all of it is going to be gone. That's too much. In my opinion, that's just simply too much. And again, it's opposite of park. I'm not saying I don't want something that I do. I do want something. I like the mixed retail space. I like the concept of something set back where you can have some benches or something. I get that, but we're losing something that too much, in my opinion. We're losing simply too much of what's going to be gained. The visual blocking of it opposite the park. It's going to, I think it may very well be taller than the Christian Science building. It's certainly going to have a very, very visual impact next to the Christian Science building. And this is going to be, again, architecturally has some nice features. I like the balconies, but still, it's a block building next to a non-block building. I just think you guys should do something better. And the fact that this has 33,500 square feet of living space. I love it. It's 33,500 square feet of living space. The plan before was 27,000 or whatever you had. That's a 24% increase in size in the footprint of living space. And the unit size went down from 1,200 something square feet per unit. Now it's a little less than 1,000 square feet per unit. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but you're increasing the size. 24%, you're increasing how much the square footage in living space.
If I may already just stop you on that, just because you probably didn't notice this, but the commercial space under the last plan was like 9,000 square feet.
Mhm.
It's like 5,000 square feet on this one. So some of what you're seeing with respect to the residential, the increase in residential is because the commercial was reduced.
Okay.
So, but it may be that.
So not all of it's reflected in the height. Okay, I can appreciate that. Okay, but still, there's a huge increase in living space. It's going up 4 stories. It's next to a residence. It's not. I don't see that as a transitional. I don't see that as a transition opposite of park.
I understand. You made that point.
And you've made several points of the same thing also. I just think it's something that the public needs to hear. Is the public, even though there aren't a lot of people commenting on right now, they've sent emails commenting on this thing. And I think it's something that's worth noting that this is quite different from what was presented a year ago. Quite
Yes.
different. And again, I like some parts of the difference. I do. Maybe if it was 3 stories plus one with push back, maybe that's something worth considering.
So,
But there's still the green space problem.
So, and this is one of this type of process is always a little bit difficult. Because we are coming to the planning board to discuss a zoning change, so we can basically do something.
Mhm.
We're giving you an idea, and we're evolving the idea as we get comments. But the building, even if the zoning change were approved, this building wouldn't be approved because we still have to come before the board, and then we have to deal with exactly those type of issues, because basically not quite every, but a lot of aspects of the project would be controlled by special permits. So the board then has the authority and the discretion to say,
Well,
it's too big, there's not enough green space.
I can appreciate that, George, I really can, but please trust me and say that when something's coming before town meeting, something's coming before the board and say, here's what we're presenting. We want to get this approved. We want to get the zoning approved, because this is kind of what we're looking for. That's kind of what we need. That's kind of what's going to be then expected.
So we're going to continue this conversation.
And so if
I'm mindful of the time.
if we
We've got
want
other
to push this through, people like myself and some other people in the public, then it needs to show something. Then we need to see something that we're going to approve. Is that's not something I think I would. That's not something I would approve.
You made that clear. You made it clear.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Thank you, Margaret. I would, we'll obviously have to give this some thought, because we've got a very tight timeline for May coming up. And then I think there were a couple of questions that were asked about some of the details of the ratios. So maybe we have a little more information to resolve that, but thank you very much for coming in and for your patience.
And thank you for your time.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
thank you all very much.
Thanks, Bruce.
Good. I'm gonna welcome Paul Alpert in, and go on now to our similar but not the same agenda item, which is discussing zoning articles potentially for May town meeting. There are two in particular that we've discussed, which originated through the ZBA and their chair, John Schneider, who I believe is present. And we may want to bring him over to a panelist. Those two issues were the 3-car garage and in the SRB zoning district, and the other is liberalizing our ADU requirements. So let's start there. And John, you see that you're on the other side here, but you're muted and we don't have any video for you. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. John, we still cannot hear you or see you. So while John is working through maybe some technology, Jean, you were proposing that we allow 3-car garages in the SRB, which had come up before. I think the ZBA had asked for that change before, but in particular, you don't want to see a 3-car garage facing the street.
Yes. Daphne Collins made a list and did a study, and we have it in our packet of, and this was back in 2018, I think, of the 3-car garage permits that had been, that had been granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And then I went out and took a look and took photographs of every one of them and made a little report on that. And I found in general that if you have the 3-car garages on the side of the building, even if it's on a side street, so it's facing the side street, and the front of the building with its front door facing the main street, that generally they have a pretty good appearance. So if it's on the side of the house, and I think we word it in such a way because some of these houses already have a 2-car garage in the front and they're looking to add a 3rd one. So in that case, if they put the 3rd one on the side, that would be fine. They could do that by right. Then the other thing is sometimes the garages are actually in a basement level under the house with a driveway that goes down, and that doesn't seem so bad either. You can still see the gracious house on its 1st floor level and its 2nd floor level. And then you have the sloping down driveway. So I think if the garages are below the house, that it should be allowed by right. And of course, if the garage or the 3rd garage is simply a separate accessory structure in the backyard, fine. Now, what about the 3-car garages when all 3 of the garages face the front? We amended our zoning bylaws. There was a large house study committee, I don't know, 6 or so years ago. Gee, time flies, maybe it's 8 years ago. And I came up with some changes to the setbacks for our houses. With the goal of having a little bit more architectural design to the houses, a little bit of in and out, rather than just a flat, especially in the front, appearance of the new house that would be built to replace the torn down house. But these standards apply to any new house, even if it's a new subdivision, isn't just tear downs. And the idea is to adjust the setbacks. So for example, I'm not sure I'm remembering the exact footage of the setback, but suppose the setback is 20 feet. You could have a certain distance, 20 feet, and then some more distance that's 5 foot setback more. So you have a little bit of an in and out. So what I'm proposing is the same thing on 3-car garages that face the front. And it's not a matter of setback from the street. It's a matter of setback from the facade of the house. So if the 3rd-car garage, or indeed all the garages, but we're, the focus here is on the 3rd-car garage, is set back at least 5 feet from the front facade of the house, it would be allowed by right. So what would you be left with for special permits? It would only be if the garage, for some reason, the owner felt it had to be what I call the snout out 3 garages right in a row facing the street. Then they'd have to go to the zoning board of appeals for a special permit to see if the particular circumstances would allow that. And in my study, I did find one circumstance where 2 of the garages were on one side of the house and one of the garages was on the other side of the house, and they all were very well designed of different fabrics, so it didn't just look like a flat, ugly thing. So there may be circumstances where the zoning board of appeals would want to grant a special permit, but instead of maybe 8 permits, there might be 1 a year. So I think it would address the concern of the zoning board of appeals that this is taking up their time to no purpose, but it would still achieve some of the design goals that we're concerned about with the 3rd garage in the 10,000 square foot lot zone. So that's my report on it, and I certainly welcome particularly John Schneider's response and whether he thinks this is a reasonable approach.
John, are you able to turn on your video? Can you hear us? Looks like you're connecting to audio. So we'll give you another minute to deal with some technological items. I will say that I think if it makes the ZBA's job a little easier, I support it. I worry that by regulating the design, I mean, we have a design review board for a reason. I think we're kind of micromanaging too much design. I would just, if we're going to allow a 3-car garage, let's allow a 3-car garage. I understand, the desire to have a little bit of a setback from the building, from the facade of the building, but there are certainly instances where you're not able to have a side garage, and it disadvantages those properties and makes those properties go through a regulatory process, even though otherwise, it would work. But I do want to hear from my colleagues, and I also want to hear from John. John, I'll try you again. Are you able to see us, John?
And in response to what the chair just said, Adam, there still would be front-facing garages allowed, but they would simply be required to be set back 5 feet from the facade of the house.
So you're okay with a 3-car garage facing the front, as long as it's set back 5 feet from the house?
Yeah, the third garage at least is set back five feet from the house. Yes. So that and you mentioned the design review board, but the design review board has, if you have special permits, the design review board has a function of reviewing and commenting on the special permits, and perhaps does so to the zoning board of appeals. I'm not sure. But if it's allowed by right, as I'm proposing, there's no role for the design review board.
I see what you're saying. Thank you for the clarity. John, we can see you. Can you hear us and can you see us?
Fell right off the screen.
Oh, we're here. We didn't fall off the screen, we're here. Oh, who's saying that? I'm sorry. Oh, you're saying
He's a
that.
ventriloquist.
Yes, it's like, I am a cat. What was that? What was that cat meme? I am a cat. I do exist.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Lee. Lee, the current zoning laws for new houses, don't the garages have to be set back from the front of the house? You're muted, Lee. You're muted.
Yes, for new construction, they do.
So I would, so what I can see is for if there's a third car being added, I can see it would have to be set back 5 feet back from the garage front almost.
So notice from the plane, in other
From the
words,
plane at the garage.
yeah.
Yeah, well, because if the
people wanna make like a
two
box.
cars are already set back 5 feet, is it 5 feet, Lee, from the front of the house?
I'm just looking it up now. Just give me a minute here.
Or
Yeah,
third garage?
so that essentially the front yards, well, I mean, if you push the house back, then there is no differential, but essentially. The front yard setback for the house, for the new construction is 20 feet, and then the garage is 25 feet.
Yes, but
So-
as Lee said, the developer could have the
Build the
whole
whole thing.
house be back 25 feet, in which case there wouldn't be a separate setback for the garage.
Right.
But I'm still saying there should be a separate setback, at least for the third car garage. But there are special circumstances. And in those special circumstances, people could still go to the zoning board of appeals and say, we need this third car garage, but we really can't do it on the side, or we can't push it back. But look how good it's going to be. So I respect the fact that there may be circumstances like that.
Gina, but are you saying, for example, in my viewpoint, I see the third car garage should be 5 feet back from the first two cars from the plane of the first garage.
I think what you're trying to say is that you don't want 3 garages, one right next to each other, creating a box, but
On the front.
that the box gets articulated by the,
Yeah,
if you want a third garage, you have to
push back
articulate
from
the box.
So yeah, push back from the first two.
So you have to, or you have to get a special permit.
Yeah,
Can I get
let's
some
get that.
clarity here? Are
Review.
you just talking about single residence B?
Yes. It's allowed by right. That's all right.
And I think we're also, as
Except
far
in
as,
SRA, you can have a 4th garage, I believe, by special permit.
By special
Right
permit,
now.
right.
And so part of the question in the back of my mind is, are we going to be applying the new rules that we were talking about? Third garages in residential B
For
for
fourth
a 4th garage in
that's
residential
right.
A, or are we just gonna leave residential A alone and
Does
not residential B?
Does residential A, the third garage, does it have any setback requirements?
No, it's allowed by right. And I don't think the ZBA has any issue or is asking us to make any changes to the single residence A. I think it's only the single residence B district that they're concerned with.
Paul's point, is it gonna be, continuity? Would we just apply the same principles?
Garages on a house is excessive in proportion to a house.
Depends on the house.
Right, so I think it should be reviewed as special permit. Because it's like a maintenance garage.
Okay. So Arnie?
no, I just, we get into the, minutia of the details, like,
Yeah.
I mean, if it's underground parking, do we really need the third one pushed back? If it's on the side,
Right.
do we really, probably not. If it's on the side, push back the third one, probably not. It's on the side, but especially if it's under the house, we start getting into You know, this is what's really needed in some cases. Certainly in the front front in my viewpoint is more obvious than this. Or underground.
This isn't complicated. We're basically saying you can do everything by right, have a third car garage, whether it's under the house, whether it's on the side of the house. But if it's on the front of the house, you have to move it back 5 feet. That's all we're saying. And
Yeah,
even
yeah.
there, you can get a special permit.
Right, and if not, you get a special permit and then you have a,
So I mean, really the proponent here is kind of the ZBA. It's important that we get their comments. I'm not sure, John, if you're able to see us and hear us.
I'm able to see you. Can you hear me?
We can
Yes.
hear you now. We cannot see you.
Yeah, for some reason, my video isn't working, but
That's,
as long as I can talk, well, thank you for hearing me. So here's my point of view. About 3 years ago, I came to the planning board and requested that you make 3 garages allowable of right in the Residence B, because I found that half of our hearings that year were on third car garages, all of which were granted, and all of which under the criteria we have, I don't see how we could possibly deny them. And I think that the current regime is burdensome owners and developers, and is a waste of a lot of time before the ZBA. And at this point in the development of the town, the houses that are being built on Residence B are basically knockdowns, and 3 garages are quite normal to have. And so when I say it's a burden on the owners, I mean, they not only have to spend filing fees and advertising fees and spend 3 months, but 80% of them feel obliged to go out and hire a lawyer, so they're spending another couple $1,000s to do all of this, and running around to their neighbors and all before a hearing. You know, from our point of view, on the ZBA, we have no right to let people build a bigger structure than what they're allowed to do under the zoning bylaw. And when we're having these hearings, it literally comes down to, will there be a garage door or siding and a regular door on some structure that people are building of right? And I can't conceive of how we would come to a conclusion that that has a material adverse effect on the surrounding properties. So I don't see how we can deny these, and I don't know what we're doing, having special permit hearings over them. I think they ought to be allowed of right.
does that give a little more, John, what's your position on a special permit for 3 car garages if it's front facing on the same plane as the front door, as opposed to a setback?
Well, you know, we currently have a 25-foot setback for front-facing garages of new construction, and I think that's adequate. I guess I just aesthetically don't share the view that these garages are unattractive. You know, people can build unattractive buildings if they want, but most of them are really quite tasteful. I think it's an unnecessary complication to require them to be around the side. A lot of the lots don't really allow that. And it's not what people want. And so I don't think, my view is that I don't think any of that's necessary. I think we ought to just simplify this and let people do it, because it's appropriate for the houses. And actually, I mean, I think it's desirable. I mean, it tends to get cars and boats off the street and out of driveways. And so I think the third car garages are not only normal, I think they're a good thing. And I think we all let people do it.
I agree. I think this should be a simple thing. It should be by right. I don't think we should be micromanaging that detail. And I have a question for you, John, with respect to SRA and the fourth car garage. Are you getting many applications for a fourth garage in SRA? Oh, did we lose John?
Gone.
Here,
Oh,
Did he go into the other?
no,
No, he had a tough connection.
Yeah.
so I tend to agree with John. Paul, what do you?
I hate to disagree with Gene, but I'm gonna disagree with Gene and Artie. I think that what we're doing here, what Gene is doing, what Artie's doing is managing the design.
Right.
We're not talking about what can be done as of right, what can be, zoning setbacks, zoning rules. It's, what do they find aesthetically pleasing? There's an old saying, there's no for taste. And so, different people find different things aesthetically pleasing. Although we do have an architect on the board.
Yeah, I'm gonna disagree with you in a second, but that's a different story.
And when we're dealing with a special permit like the Muzzy site, yeah, it's appropriate for us at that point to look at the design and what we want to see there on an individual basis. But I think on a zoning situation, and tastes change over time. What people like now, they don't like 5 years from now. What they don't like now, they'll like 5 years from now. 4 years ago, when we looked at this, I drove around town. I took a look at houses that had garages that were not set back from the house, that were flush to the house. I didn't have a problem with it. I thought they looked fine. I agree with John and with you, Mr. Chair, that just make it all as of right and not require a special permit for the house that's already set back 25 feet and the 25-foot setback on the garage.
What struck me is that what John said was, it's not really having a material impact on the surrounding house and on the neighboring house. Again, if the thing is at the same plane, or if it's 5 foot back, or on the side, it doesn't have a material impact on a neighboring. I see, Natasha, what you're pulling up as an example at 5 Sunrise Terrace. There are several around town where the garage
It's bigger than the house.
protrudes. Well, the garage protrudes, there's a closer setback. The house is set back further than the garage, so the garage stands out more. And
But
you
it's
don't like
also
that.
wider. It's also bigger.
Well,
I guess what I'm,
Yeah, no, that's.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Thank you. Paul,
Quickly they forget.
no.
Just a moment.
Wait a second.
It was a really good New Year's.
Dry Jan.
I understand what you're saying to simplify it and that in most cases it doesn't, but I think in general, what I heard from Mark Glusing also is that we don't have a lot of say on any of the houses. And I think that that's, besides the zoning, and I think that's okay. In most instances, I do think that there are instances where, especially in Residence B, which is what we're talking about, right? Where the lots are smaller, the houses are smaller, and the garages tend to be larger. And I think there needs to be some type of articulation to have maybe 2 and 1, which is what Jean was saying. And it's not for every single one of them, so they can come in for a special permit for that particular one if that's different from the front. The side, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't matter, if it's on the side or anything, but just in the sense that they're the smaller lots and that that the garage could be larger than the house proportionately. If we don't really have if the town doesn't really have a say on anything else, I think at least the opportunity for it to be articulated a little more would be beneficial. So
I understand.
Yeah, could I say, please understand, people are building structures that they're entitled to build of right. The only issue is whether there's gonna be a garage door in it. I mean, we're not restricting people from building any size they want to build by this special permit process. I mean, they're all building structures that they're entitled to build.
But it articulates it, and rather than a big box, which is what, you know, especially if it's a house,
But what John is saying is that if you take 5 Sunrise Terrace,
right?
okay, and you take that, you take one of the side garage doors and you make it a storage area. You're not changing the size of that entire structure. You're just gonna take that third garage thing, that third garage door, get to a storage area with a regular door. You still have the right to build that structure, which is
Correct.
bigger than the house.
Correct,
You
but,
just have
but
a-
you might have a
just have 2
driveway,
garage doors and a side door instead of 3 garage doors.
but you might have a driveway that's narrower. Or, and the proportion of the garage doors to the rest of the building.
Hold
There's a,
hold on a second. If you have to, just to your point, and it's too bad, can we bring up from our packet?
Yeah, it's in the
3,
packet.
I know, but I'm asking.
If
Alex.
this is
Hold on,
not a
hold on,
door.
hold on, please. Alex, can you please bring up? So people at home can see what we're seeing and talking about as an example. In our packet. 5 Sunrise Terrace. So, Asha, if we required that the garage door be on the side for the third garage, you're gonna have to drive up and you're gonna create more impervious space.
No,
Oh, wait,
that's not what
Artie,
Natasha's saying.
Artie,
She said, push it.
Artie, let me finish.
But you said,
please.
something
Artie,
Natasha isn't saying. that.
Artie, just let me talk.
Not saying.
I'm asking you not to interrupt.
You do it to me, but she's not saying that.
Not saying what she's saying. He's
So-
saying what he's saying.
No.
In the event we have garages on the side. You end up having to swing the driveway around. As an example, right near me, there was a house that's redid their garage.
Mhm.
And as a result of putting the 3-car garage on the side, they had to create more impervious space because you come in off the street.
Right, you
I
could do
can't
that,
remember if they're on High Rock
but you
or,
could do that, but you could have all of this be grass, right?
right, but now instead of, hold on.
But you have that.
Right, but the point is, instead of this, you
That's
lose
not-
this as grass. That's what I'm saying is, as an example, when my neighbors did this, they lost 50 feet by at least 50 feet of, or no, 25 by
side.
20, they lost 600
that's-
square feet of grass.
Right, but that's not what I'm arguing. The tectonics of the building. No, because of the site, you could like this, and then here you would just have grass, right? What I'm saying is typically if you have a garage, if it's 3 garage, they all come in the same.
This is
If
unusual.
we just took those doors out, they
Yeah,
still have
they
the same.
have the right to do it.
I get what you're saying.
So we're having hearings over whether
This should be a garage
Like-
door or a regular door.
Yeah.
John,
My thing is that if this is, if this becomes, then you don't have to, the driveway could be here, let's say. And the proportion of garage door in the front of your house is less, right? So if
right,
that's,
but
if that's, if
John's
that's
saying,
dark,
I understand what you're saying, except that the box remains the box.
I agree. Right,
So,
but you still have, but the proportion of garage doors in the front is more. The box is still the box, but the
Box is
propor-
still the box and they still have the right to build that large driveway if they want to.
and they could build a large driveway if they want to. But you have 2 doors rather than 3 doors that are in the same plane.
Well, that's not kidding.
And where,
But Paul, you're saying we're not legislating,
that's
design.
right. And what we're doing is we're putting in our bylaws.
Yeah, but everything that we do, almost everything that we do has some visual effect, like we change the setback to the wall or to the foundation versus the overhang. That visually made a much more appealing structure because now the overhang can be better, can be bigger. So visually, it's much more appealing. We change the setback on the front of the house to make it easy, to make sure the garages are not sticking in front of the houses. We do things all the time which have a visual impact on it. So let's not kid ourselves. All we're simply saying is, if there's a third car garage.
I'm only looking at kid you.
That's fine. It's not working, Paul. It's not working, my friend. All we're saying is in the front of the house, if there's three car garage in the front of the house, if there's two and they want to add a third, it just has to be set back. Because if it's not set back, potentially you have 3-car garage, a house, all in the same plane potentially. All we're saying is that 3rd-car garage, just simply set it back 5 feet.
And
That's
if you
all we're
don't need to
saying.
Come here and. it
That's
could-
all we're saying.
Site requires it to.
Not as almost the same.
She's saying it's gotta be around the side.
Exactly, or down.
Which
and
means
along.
they're gonna take the.
John,
And if I could have,
John,
and I'll
hold
put-
on hold on one
Sure.
second. please. John, did you have another comment?
No, I mean, no, I don't think so.
It
no,
seems as though Jean, Natasha, and Artie are still looking to require a special permit if 3 garage doors are in the front
And on the same plane.
and on the same plane as the front,
Yeah.
on the same
You're
plane.
gonna give it to them.
But you can have 3
Oh.
garage.
And we're gonna give it to them. If they come to us, there's no basis to deny it. I mean,
We're saying as a right, we're saying it could be set back as a right.
No, but listen to what John's saying.
They're gonna give it to
He's saying
them.
they can.
Do you think?
may I just
Do
say
you think we're
something?
gonna come to a conclusion that having a garage door instead of siding on a third of this having the garage door as a material adverse impact on the neighborhood? I mean, I don't see it. That's why, it's making people jump through hoops, but we're always gonna grant the permit.
May I, if I may,
Yes, Jean.
we did have speak of legislating design, and Artie said, well, of course we do. And, recalling the large house committee and the changes that we made to our setbacks in order to affect the design of the houses. I've been meaning to do a study personally of what impact that had, and we should do such a study. But I just want it to be respected that when this was raised by the Zoning Board of Appeals by John Schneider in 2018, I took it very seriously. And I said, really, this needs to be studied. I went out, I did study it. I produced a report. It came up with concept that, yes, this can all be done. We don't need a special permit. The one exception is when you have the 3 front facing out, on the plane of the house or out in front of the house. Now, suppose we go along with that. We go to town meeting, we change this so that only in that circumstance do you need a special permit. Then we see how it goes. People will actually change their designs in accordance with what the zoning bylaw requires. And there may be no requests for special permits. But if it ends up that there are requests for special permits, because everybody wants to put the 3 cars all in a row in the front, and it's a burden on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and they always grant them anyway, we can rethink this. But it seems like we have the support of 3 members of the committee to go forward with what I put forth.
I'm going to agree with Jean on that point. That if they have to go through the special permit process in order to have the 3 garage doors on the same plane and not be set back from the house, the developer is probably going to set back that 3rd garage rather than go through the special permit process. Because it's going to save them money. It's not going to cost them a lot of money to set it back 5 feet. And which will accomplish what 3 of the 5 board members want to accomplish. I'm going to approve whatever we wind up drafting here.
Right,
Because this is long overdue.
I agree.
And
Excuse me, but I'm a little confused. I thought Jean is proposing that you can only have 2 garages in the front and the third one has to be on the side. Or
No,
No,
John.
no, they're all in the front
They're all
or
in the
all on the side. or
as
however.
long as they're set back?
As long
Yes,
as the
as long
third,
as at least one of them is set back, even, not even
third one's
requiring all
set.
3 to be set back.
Then I do kind of agree with Artie that rather than go through the special permit process, the developers are just gonna set them back.
Mhm. That would be good.
So I think we have resolution here. The two kidders got each other. John, this has been helpful. Lee, are you able to draft up for our next meeting, language so we can approve, and then perhaps there'll be this and a couple of other items that we'll probably want to speak to the warrant committee about, and then they'll refer it back to us and connect a hearing. Lee, you're muted.
I will work with Jean and we will come up with an appropriate amendment to accomplish the objectives that she's described.
Okay. All right. Thank you all very much.
Great.
Before we move on, I do see that we have a comment from Lou's note 10. And I think that's probably Lou Wolfson. So Lou, we're going to bring you over and ask if you could state your full name and address for the record, because that would be helpful. John, we appreciate you standing by because we'll also want to chat about ADUs.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking time to listen. Happy New Year to everyone as well. I happen to disagree with John Snyder 100%. Can you hear me?
Lee, but can we, Lou, can we have your name and address, please?
Lou Wolfson, 29 Semino Road, Needham. I disagree with John. I believe that the neighbors and abutters should have input on design that may affect their homes. Some of you may remember Ron Ruth, who used to be the chair of the planning board for a number of years.
Sure.
And this was brought up on Pleasant Street. And actually, there's 2 homes on Pleasant Street that both have 3-car garages. One is on the side, it has a 2-car garage on the side, and one has 2-car garage, and then it's sided. The siding does make a huge difference on this, as opposed to having a 3-car garages. Also you're dictated by the lot sizes. I mean, if you have 100-foot frontage, I agree. Okay, maybe that might be a little bit different and it might be able to accommodate a 3rd-car garage. But most of these lots in this single residence B are 80-foot frontage and some are smaller. And I also heard Jean say, oh yeah, just throw the 3-car garage out back. That's fine as well. And I disagree. I think as an abutter, that would pose a major problem to me. And we all, I think most of us live in single residence B zones on the committee here. And I don't think any of us would not like to have some input on that 3rd-car garage. And John, that's why you're there. You're there to listen to the abutters, okay, and the neighbors. If they have an issue with it, I think you should listen. And if you approve 80% or that, but you're talking how many in a year? Jean said there were 18 over a course of how many years, Jean?
I think it was 2 years, and that study was done by Daphne Collins, the staff of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm pretty sure it was over a 2-year period that it was the 18. Yeah.
2 years and 18. And I would say that most of those were on at least 100-foot frontages. And the ones that were on less, may have had them on the side. Sunrise is not necessarily a great poster child for this because it's a subdivision of larger size homes. And
it was 3 years. 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. So that's, that's
16 total. 16 total.
So that's listening to a few and 5 a year. I don't see that too many. And here's a committee, a planning board, that's talking about in the apartment zones of lowering our parking ratios because they want to see more transit oriented. And here we're going to throw 3-car garages at us. That's my 2 cents for the moment. I appreciate being heard. And John, I appreciate that you are willing to listen to the abutters and, you know, and we'll continue to do so.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you.
The public looking to speak on this, and it sounds like the board's resolved. I would now like to speak to the issue of ADUs. John, just to ensure that we have you while we have a good connection, what are your thoughts on the planning board liberalizing the ADU requirement? Do you want to hear first, John, what Gene's proposal is to liberalize ADUs?
No, you know, I can speak. I mean, I'm personally in favor of allowing ADUs to be occupied by anyone. I think that's the simplest thing we could do to promote affordable housing in the town. And it would also let senior citizens stay in their house by getting some income. But, you know, that's a big policy matter. The one thing I would say on that is I would consider requiring that the owner live in one of the units in order to prevent outside investors of buying up what amount to 2-family houses. But I think it would be great progress towards affordable housing. But apart from that issue, I have at least one big problem with the current bylaw. It requires that people come back in 3 years for another hearing on their special permit. And I have no idea what we're going to be doing. I mean, people have constructed a property and I guess another perspective on this is if someone really understood our bylaw, I don't think they would come in for a special permit. They can build an in-law apartment of any size without a necessity of coming back every 3 years and a lot of restrictions. The only thing they can't do is have a kitchen. You know, they can put in a microwave and a toaster oven, you know, and why would you bother with this complex ADU thing we have? We're just about to turn 3 years, and those poor people are going to have to come back and spend another filing fee, and some of them will think they need to have lawyers. We're going to have hearings, and I don't know what we're doing. I mean, if the issue is to determine who's living in there, that's a job for the building inspector. And in every permit we've approved, we put in a provision that if people don't respond to the building inspector's request about who's living in there, he has the right to terminate the permit. So I really think we ought to eliminate the requirement that people come back once they have a special permit to have it renewed every 3 years.
I'm fine with that, but I would like to see, and curious, John, what your thought is, that the minimum term for a rental be 12 months, not less than. And this is really for the purposes of avoiding like an Airbnb scenario all over town. And that there be some requirement to submit to the building department or the planning department, you know, the lease. So I think it's difficult to expect the town to increase its you know, enforcement of this kind of thing. They have to go and come up with a list of homes they have to go and inspect every time. It's a lot easier to take a look at the lease. And if it's not valid, that they're not compliant. I just don't know what we can, you know, and then they're not compliant, I guess, you know, with the regulations, even if it is by right. Gene, would you support that kind of thing?
Well, we presently have a requirement that the lease be 6 months. And you're proposing that it be changed to 1 year, Adam?
Yes. The only, I mean, being, having, practiced in the, residential real estate market and working from time to time with tenants, it's not uncommon, for instance, to have nurses in particular that may come from a different state that will be here on a 6-month basis. It's not so common that other people are gonna be, that other professionals would be here on a 6-month basis. I do know, I can't remember offhand why, but it's very common for nurses to be up in Massachusetts for not more than 6 months, and typically it's a 6-month contract. But beyond that, it becomes a short-term rental. And I also agree with John that it ought to be owner occupied, because I fear that otherwise,
We already have that requirement.
Yeah, we have that.
right, but I want to continue that.
Continue it.
But nobody's suggesting that we change that.
Okay, but I'm just explaining why I like it.
Yeah.
Because I fear that without it, and I've seen this, when if they become rental units, one side or the other, that the absentee landlord isn't necessarily maintaining the property, at it, as they otherwise would. But Paul, you're absolutely right. No one's advocating to remove that requirement. But I would like to see the lease term be 12 months, and I would like to see the lease be, submitted to either Lee or Dave Roach's office. Lee, I see your hand is up.
No, Dave Roach.
Well, I don't have a question. I just wanted to circle back to John, if we could, once we finish this, a question. I just have a question on where this requirement for an additional special permit is coming from under zoning, because as I read it, the occupancy permit was issued for 3 years, and then you went back to the building inspector after those 3 years to renew the occupancy permit. So John, what's triggering the requirement for the special permit to only run for 3 years?
I didn't read it that way. I read the special permit is only good for 3 years, which means people have to come in and renew it.
No, I'm looking at the words right now, and it has to do with the occupancy permit. The initial occupancy permit remains in force for 3 years. Thereafter, permits may be issued by the building commissioner for succeeding 3-year periods, providing that the structure and use continue to comply with the relevant provisions of the state building code and Needham bylaws. So it is not a requirement for a new special permit hearing.
Then I apologize. I'm wrong. I was misreading it.
But it goes to the issue, John, of whether we need a special permit in the first place at all.
I think that makes sense because of the requirement that you get a determination that this still looks like a single family house.
That's exactly the hardest point here. If that's how to come up with precise standards that can be applied by the building commissioner, just by reading the bylaw and making sure the house complies. And I'm trying to find, there are 2 ways of approaching it. One is to say, have the design review board review the design and simply report to the building commissioner whether the appearance of the house is that of a single family. But it's still the building commissioner who makes the ultimate decision. But the other is to be very precise about the location of doors. And we do have the paragraph, to the extent possible, exterior entrances and access ways shall not detract from the single family appearance of the dwelling. Well, all right, that's a goal, but how do you do that exactly? If you say that the doors have to be on the side of the house, if they're from the front porch, they have to be on the side of the front porch, so it's not visible from the street, so that from the street, it has the appearance of a single family house. Is there a way of crafting the words so that the building commissioner can interpret it, apply it, and we don't need a special permit? John, you're suggesting that maybe you don't think You think that's,
Well,
that would be,
if you can come up with that criteria, I think it's great. I mean, I think it is a burden on homeowners to have to come in for a special permit. And
Mhm,
they end up spending a lot of money
yeah.
because most of them feel they need to get a lawyer.
Yeah, so that's the goal here. The goal is to not require a special permit. Now, what we're talking about, and I really want your view on this, John, is creating something, some new opportunity, and that is the ability to put an accessory dwelling unit in an accessory building, such as an existing garage or barn. And there's two ways of doing it. One is you can be cautious about this. You can only do it if it's in an existing accessory building. You can't build a new one for this purpose, or you can build a new one. But whether it's the existing accessory dwelling, accessory building, or a new one, you have to get a special permit for that. So what do you think of that?
Well, personally, I don't find it offensive if people want to have a garage with a unit over it. As long as the overall situation meets the test that this still looks like a single family home.
Well, that's the issue. Can we come up with design criteria that we specify so that won't happen? Or does it need a special permit for a board to make that determination?
Well, again, if you can come up with criteria, I think it relieves the homeowners of a burden. The special permit process is not simple, and it's costly for these people. And if you can eliminate it, I think you should.
And the other point, Gene, if we have to set standards that are objective, whether those are subjective for, sorry, I should say that are objective. We have to set objective criteria, whether that's for them to just get a building permit or whether it's for a special permit by the ZBA. The criteria still has to be objective. I do think that we can limit the, I'm certainly open to allowing an ADU above a garage if it's a separate structure by right without a special permit. And I just want to make sure that we have, we maintain the height limit, because that's what you would otherwise, you could easily, if a garage is commonly in a 2-car garage, something like 25 by 25, is that roughly 600 square feet? So maybe you add another level above that. I think that starts to,
Well,
get away. Yeah, go ahead, John.
yeah, I was going to say, under the regime we now have, an accessory garage only needs to be 5 feet from the sideline.
Yeah.
But if it exceeds a certain height, then it has to have a bigger setback. And whatever, that's the current regime we have. And you could consider saying that if it's going to have an ADU, it has to have an even greater setback, although I personally don't think that's necessary.
I want to also now turn for a minute to a comment that we've received by Reg Foster from our Needham Housing Authority. He sent an email today, which I'll read into the record, about broadening the existing ADU bylaw requirements. The Needham Housing Authority supports the recommendations currently in the plan and agrees with arguments that no special design review board step need be required for by right ADUs. However, we continue to advocate that the by right number of bedrooms be changed from 1 to 2, and that the maximum permissible size be increased from 850 square feet to, quote, not larger than the floor area, not larger in the floor area than half the floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. And this is quoting from a statute. Of all the recommendations of the plan, we feel the recommended ADU bylaw changes have the greatest potential for near-term improvement to Needham's shortage of affordable housing. So Edge's suggestion is to allow these become 2-bedroom units instead of 1-bedroom units. And to increase the size by 50 square feet at most to 900 square feet.
Excuse me, is it at most or at least, I thought I heard that it could be higher than 900 square feet, but not to exceed 1/2 of the area of the principal dwelling?
One,
Yeah.
whichever is smaller.
Oh, okay.
So-
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
John, do you have a thought on these becoming up to 50 square feet larger on the one hand, and on the other hand, what's your take on these becoming 2 bedrooms instead of 1 bedrooms?
Well, again, I point out, if someone doesn't put a kitchen in there, they can build, any size that the FAR and lot coverage lets them do.
Right.
The only thing the ADU permit's doing is letting them put in a kitchen. Certainly another 50 square feet makes no difference.
Then one funny question I have for you, Lee, is I can't remember, do we have any homes? And I'd be curious how many in SRB that are on a septic system?
There may be, Lee, I wouldn't know, but Lee may know, but
I don't know off the top of my head. I think if we have any, they're rare. I don't know without, I don't know.
it would be easy enough to say you gotta go on town sewage if you're having an ADU.
Right.
Yes, John, good point. We don't say that now, but that is a good point.
That's a very expensive point.
You're a
It's
band-
not cheap to hook up to town sewer.
Oh, yeah.
Now. I mean, you might not even have town sewer running on your street. I mean, I've got septic, there's no sewer on Pine Street. I can't hook up to the sewer if I want to. Or if I'm required to, because there's no sewer there.
So septic system requirement, you were talking about how many bedrooms you have is the size of the septic system. So I mean, it sounds like that should be the requirement, not per se.
That's a limiting factor.
Yeah, I mean, not per se for town sewer, but it's always been the limiting factor is how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms. And that's just the whole requirement.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that happens automatically, doesn't it, under some of the codes?
Under the requirements with the Board of Health, that's right. So then you'd be in a scenario where someone would lose a bedroom in the main part of their house. And then creating a new bedroom or 2, which could potentially exceed the threshold for the capacity of the septic. That's regulating the septic under Title V. So I don't know, Lee, if we have to factor that into, if we do allow for 2 units, if we have to factor into, provision that provided that, whoever's looking for the building permit for the ADU to construct the ADU, they have to maintain their compliance if they're on a septic with Title V.
I think I don't think that's a zoning issue. I think that's a Board of Health issue, septic system issue. So the zoning is regulating the land use, and then they're going to have to meet Title V or sewage requirements. So if they have extra bedrooms, they'll have to enlarge the system to accommodate it.
Yeah, the building commission would flag that and make sure that compliance occurred with the Board of Health.
Going back to your original question, Adam, I think allowing 2 bedrooms, while it may ultimately make sense, I think that's maybe a little more controversial than just allowing it to be
Yes,
more square feet, and you're doing a lot here. And it might be good to get some experience before you go that far.
that's valid. I appreciate that.
So someone could do it by special permit.
Yeah. I suppose. Or we just keep it as a one bedroom by right. It's not allowed by special permit to have two. It's tested for years like we've done with this. And then if we see any additional need, then we could potentially expand it to 2 bedroom by special permit.
You mean at a later town meeting? Not presently. Have we dealt with every issue? I just want to make sure, because we're talking about keeping all our current rules except no special permit if it's within the dwelling. John was suggesting that we don't need a special permit either if it's in an accessory dwelling.
I agree.
And would that be only if the accessory dwelling is currently in existence?
Yes.
And we're talking about increasing to 950 square feet. And coming up,
Here, please, we're covering a lot of areas. I've had comments on all of this, and I haven't had a chance to speak.
oh, okay, I'm sorry, I'm summing up prematurely. I'm sorry.
Okay, you're summing up, and I even hadn't had a chance to speak.
I'm
So
sorry.
here, if I may,
Please.
okay? I'm looking at what's on, it's labeled as page 52 of the Needham Housing Plan, which is in our packet. I don't know what page it is in the packet. I disagree that the detached ADU needs to be in an existing accessory building.
Mhm.
I see why, if there's going to be a newly built accessory building that would otherwise meet the requirements of our zoning bylaw, you can't include an ADU in it. Why does it have to be existing? You can build a garage and wait a year and a half, and now you've got an existing building and you can put an ADU in it.
You had me at hello.
I had Adam at it. Oh. That's number one. I don't think it has to be an existing accessory building.
Okay,
Eliminate the residency restriction, i.e. the unit can be rented to anyone. I don't understand where we're going there, but I think we need to still have 3 criteria. It's either family or caregiver or a lease of a certain period of time.
Right.
oh, yeah,
Okay, we're not eliminating the current residency restrictions, we're just adding on to it.
So then it would be occupied.
It still has to be owner occupied,
One of the buildings.
one of them has to be owner occupied. And the other unit can be rent-free family member, rent-free caregiver, or rental on a lease. I personally agree with Adam that it should be 12 months.
Mhm.
I mean, I saw the 6 months and I struggled with it. I'm going, well, I'd rather it were 12, but I guess I could live with 6.
Mhm.
I really would rather that it were 12.
Mhm.
I'd like to see it with no special permit at all, just the building commissioner. And if we need to bring in design review, maybe, if there's some concern about how to, do we trust the building commissioner to say you're maintaining the look or you're not maintaining the look? I guess that's the question. I think plan suggested that there be some consideration for allowing the new construction of ADUs and detached structures in single residence A. I'm all in favor of that, but we should also add not only single residence A, but also rural residence conservation, which is essentially the same. It's very close to very much the same requirements of single residence A. They're 1 acre minimum, 150 feet frontage minimum. I think it should be both of those.
Paul,
Those-
clarification.
It's already allowed there.
What are you saying about single residence B? Paul?
Anything about single residence.
That should be by right. Right? Or, yeah.
What are you saying with single residence A?
Special permit.
On the bottom of this page 42, the last bullet point. This housing plan also suggests that there be some consideration for allowing the new construction of ADUs in detached structures. So you can have a totally separate detached structure ADU
Oh,
for
okay,
residence A district.
okay, I understand, sorry, yep.
I'm
It
just saying
doesn't have
that
to be an accessory building like a barn or garage. It can be a detached structure that's only an ADU. Got it.
you, as long as it's in single residence A, and I'm saying
Also,
also rural residence conservation, because that's essentially the same. The same lot requirements as single residence A, so I got no problem. Which is actually probably where you're gonna see it more like the South Street.
Right.
Mhm.
Those were,
Chestnut.
those were my comments, and I think we get, if we can, we get rid of the special permit process altogether.
I agree.
Put it into the hands of the building commissioner.
Unless, John, there's any reason that you see a need for a special permit under any purpose.
I think the only issue, actually, in the hearings we've had so far, there's been no one opposed, no comment. It is run through. I think the only issue is, I think we want to maintain the criteria that it has to still maintain the look of a single family house.
That's in the bylaw.
And someone needs to make that determination. And I'm perfectly happy, and I think it's a benefit to avoid the special permit process. If you want to have design review, make that determination, and make a recommendation to the building inspector.
Design
How
review.
about this, and I don't know whether we can write it in the bylaw or it's just as a practical matter. That it's in the hands of the building commissioner. But if the building commissioner is in doubt,
Go to the design review board.
then he says to them, either go to design review board or he
Yeah.
says to them, go to the ZBA. We can draft it either way.
Well, if it's a design issue,
Design
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 review
review
board.
board.
I'm fine with that.
And if it's a zoning issue, then the zoning.
Lee, your hand is up.
Yes, I hate to, I hate to put cold water on something. I guess I'm just a little, I understand the idea of allowing the accessory dwelling unit in the primary dwelling as of right. I guess I just have maybe a little more concern than anybody else does here, obviously, about when it starts to happen in accessory structures and whether or not there would be more people in the neighborhood that wanted to know about that or at least have an opportunity to speak on that. And so I guess I'm not as comfortable allowing it in an accessory structure by right without some kind of public process.
Should we do that by special permit?
I guess I would start there, and then maybe if the experience is that it's not necessary, you get rid of it. But I guess I'm not willing to jump there initially. So, John, I guess you do more. You do a lot of these hearings in residential neighborhoods. What's your recommendation on that?
I'm fine if you want to maintain a special permit to have a separate accessory dwelling unit. That's fine with me. And I mean, we ought to note that in the almost 3 years, I think we've had less than a dozen ADU permits. I mean, it has not been popular or worked well.
Well,
And
I wonder what will happen, though. I'm hoping that when we open it up to, a broader audience beyond just immediate family and caregivers, that we'll get other people interested in taking advantage of this option.
I think we will.
And it's by right, and then the question is, do we allow 2 bedrooms as
Yeah,
well?
but from what I've been reading, from the materials that have been presented to us. I don't think any towns are really getting much more in the way of ADUs than what Needham has been getting. Whether it's been special permit or as of right. A lot of towns has put it into effect. They have not gotten a lot of them.
Because they haven't actually been that popular, in which case we're almost creating something for nothing, but Lee, do you have anything else? Your hand is still up. If not, I'm gonna go to Oscar.
I have one other question.
Yes, John, please.
The current ADU says that it expires on a transfer of the property. And
Yeah.
I don't know what you're contemplating on the new one, but that really doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, if a new owner continues to use it in the same way, why should he have to get a new special permit?
I agree with that. I would
Well,
remove that restriction.
But John, we're just changing it to put it all in the hands of the building commissioner anyway.
Well,
And so I think that on the transfer of the property, if the new owner is going to continue to use the ADU, all that he needs to do is go to the building commissioner and say, please give me a permit because I have a caregiver living here, or I have a family member living here, or here's a copy of the lease.
it's a lot better than requiring a special permit,
Yeah.
but again, I guess I just don't see the purpose of it. If there's a change of owner and they're still complying with all of your requirements.
Yeah, but if they're not complying, the building commissioner needs to know that.
Mhm.
I don't think that the assumption should be that the new owner is going to be using the ADU as an ADU. I think the assumption should be that a new owner is buying a single family home, is not putting in a second residence, a second person living there. And all we're asking that person to do is march into this building and present to the building commissioner proof that he or she is continuing to use it as an ADU.
And
It's just a filing.
but so the purpose of the filing is so that the town knows that there's gonna be a continued use of an apartment.
Mhm.
And
Right, that the building has changed hands and that the new owner is continuing to use the ADU as an ADU.
In my viewpoint, the owner occupied status is almost the primary point of concern when the building is sold. You know, is it really going to be owner occupied? You know, whether it's continued to be used or not continued to be used in the ADU is almost immaterial. It's there to be used. It cannot be
Make
used.
sure that they're.
Is it actually going to be owner occupied? In my
Yeah,
viewpoint,
and
that's.
Because
It's
if
not
they
a special
buy it-
permit process, it's just a question of getting an occupancy permit.
Because if they buy it to be a rental and they have 2 rental units.
yeah, I would continue that requirement.
So proof to the building inspector that the person is actually living there. Needs to
The
be
person's
part of the application.
That the new line with the bylaw.
The interesting thing that this sets up, which I didn't really fully think through until now, is Paul's earlier point that now you get the empty nesters, let's say, that move into the unit above the garage,
Yeah,
and now they're renting out their whole house, except that, their own space.
yeah,
For
$6,000 a month.
yes, correct. What do we care?
What do we care?
Well, I will say that that's not having any beneficial impact on affordable housing. Because if that were the case.
But it's allowing that empty nester to stay in Needham
Right,
in the single family residence.
Right.
And not having to
Right.
move into Rosemary
Right,
Ridge and
right,
be
right.
Gene's neighbor.
So now they don't, well.
poor Jean.
Gee, that's was a benefit. That was meant with affection and love.
No doubt.
So
To be clear is, do we not want to allow the owner to live in the accessory unit
They can,
and rent out the house? We want that, but we would allow that circumstance if the family member were living in the main house, would we?
Under any
under any
circumstance.
circumstance.
I made a mistake, Gene. I hadn't thought that through properly. And once again, Paul corrected me and gave me clarity. So now, just to be clear, as Lee and you perhaps redraft or draft the amendment.
Yeah.
This is allowed by right. That either unit could be rented to a family member, a caregiver. Or any other person, provided that in option C. It's rented to any other person. It's on a minimum of a 12-month, it's on a minimum of a 12-month lease. And that lease needs to be given, submitted to the building commissioner. And notice would need to be given as well that they're using it as an ADU.
Now, let me ask this question.
Okay,
Person,
evictions.
yeah, person's gonna have somebody moving in to the other unit.
The main house,
It doesn't matter,
okay,
not a family member,
yeah,
not a caregiver,
yeah,
family friend. You
Yeah.
know,
totally.
it's the second cousin of a family friend. It's on a lease for $1 a year. Okay, is that okay with us? They're presenting a lease, lease is for a year. But it's not a fair rental value lease, it's just,
Who cares?
It doesn't.
he doesn't care.
No, I'm saying, I mean, should we care? Do we care?
What, that's my question, do we care? Is it,
I don't know why we
That
should.
would be regarding.
when is, when,
As long as the owner.
when is the lease
the other
not a
building.
lease?
I don't know why we
What's
should.
our objective? Our objective is to allow seniors who couldn't otherwise afford to live in town. Be able to continue to live here because they can get
Yeah.
the rental income.
And
But if it's somebody who doesn't need the rental income,
They can still
has
rent.
the broader purpose though, and we will have to change, I think, the purpose section. Is to create more affordable housing. And that's how renting it for $1, or renting it for $10, or $6,000. It's still regarded as affordable in measure.
What creates a different
But you have to
size
remember-
of housing.
but you have to remember that what we're doing. Is we're creating 2 family homes
Yeah.
in what is now single family district.
Correct.
Which, you know, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with
At
it,
900
Is the
square feet
phrase.
max.
you know, not that there's
Versus
anything wrong
versus
with
a
that.
duplex, right, or
Yeah.
something, or a two-family home.
Yeah.
It's a maximum 900 square feet. That allows for flexibility for affordability, or if it's someone with special needs in their family that wants to continue to live but a little more privately or something like that, then you give options that we currently don't have.
And now you're gonna have. Potential bedrooms and not just a 1-bedroom.
Well, we didn't agree on that one. On the
No,
two-bedroom.
we did not.
I think we decided not to go there.
I think it can be by special permit, right?
If it's a 2-bedroom, right?
I think that,
As of right,
I
it's
think the
1 bedroom.
sentiment was that it's too much to present to town meeting.
Okay, so 1 bedroom for now, and we were gonna see how that worked out and how
Yeah.
many.
Right.
And
Okay.
did we land on the accessory structures being a special permit?
It's yes.
I think
accessory-
so. I think,
Yes, okay.
yeah.
accessory
And
structure.
Lee, I saw you sort of shaking your head with concern about, I thought it
Hello.
was in where it said either unit can be rented, provided it's a 1-year lease. Do you have a concern about
No.
that?
No,
Now, at this point, I'd like to bring in Oscar Mertz, and again, Oscar, when you come over, I don't think you did it the last time.
No.
If you could state your name and address for the record. Tisk, tisk. I do have my gavel.
Hi, Oscar Mertz, 67 Library Hillway.
Thank you very much.
So, thanks, guys. Great conversation. That's awesome. I'm so glad we're talking about this. And I agree with everything, and I appreciate the detail of the conversation. I do think I would like to ask that we do consider by right, just for the simplicity of it, for the detached as well. But I'll defer to you guys. I still think I'd advocate for both being by right. And I do like, I don't know, I guess I'm hopeful that we will have a good educational campaign and really get out in front of this so that the town meeting members really know what these issues are, know the detail that this is conversation. They need to know this conversation in detail before, so they get up to speed, so that they can, so we can feel like we don't have to negotiate with ourselves to back down on doing something that we, it's, you know, every time we go through the process, say, well, let's test it. And then it's 2 years later. So, and again, it's the numbers. ADUs are a small number. And 50% increase on ADUs when they go to no restriction and go to detached. So small, a 50% increase on a small number is still a small number. So I think we all need to always keep that in mind, because I think it is a great opportunity to create small residential units for so many people. And, you know, we'll see how many people actually step up and actually create them. So my only point would be, I would like to push a little more on by right for both attached and detached. And I was listening to Paul, and I think Paul was what was pushing me over the, his arguments were persuasive to me. So I would think it would be nice to consider that both are by right. And then the special permit for 2 bedrooms, I think would be great. But again, I defer to you guys. But that would be my wish. I like the 900 increase, but we lived in 780 for a 2-bed, so 850 is huge. So 850 is an easy 2-bed. So I'm good with even keeping 850 if people don't want to go to the 9. So if people are concerned about size. Anyway. So anyway, thank you guys.
Thank you very much, Oscar.
Thank you.
Does anyone else in the public have any other comments on this item? I don't see, so I would like, are there any other residential zoning changes that we can advance for May?
I think this is enough.
Could handle a few more.
If we want to have any energy efficiency changes off of that.
I'm
Well,
talking about
we're gonna
going
come
to
to
the
that.
town meeting.
Yeah, I think we could be effective. This, by the way, you know, Gina and Natasha, this is gonna be a very interesting litmus test on, because this is cracking the door on density, increased density by right.
Yeah, in fact, I think that this would only require a majority vote of town meeting under the changes in the state law that took place a couple of years ago.
That's right.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'd like to turn to the subject matter of energy efficiency, or what I am now calling climate smart zoning.
Are we ready to?
John, do you have any other comments?
Only that I see on your agenda, you're gonna discuss what we did on January 19th.
Yes, do you want to, so we can, you want us to just to have a quick conversation about that now?
Well, if you'd like my input, I'll stay on to do that when you just switch.
I will say, I've gone through it. This is a commercial use. It's going from office to medical office in a building, I think that's otherwise office, a medical office. I didn't have a problem with this. Artie, did you have a problem?
Mr. Chair, I move that we make no recommendation.
I hadn't heard from
No comment. I move
Gene, do you-
that we make no comment.
Gene. We have a
I
motion.
wish to recuse myself. I am immediate across the street, a butter. And I understand notices have been mailed and I'm expected to receive one. So I am recusing myself from the discussion and the vote.
So for the record, we note that Jean has recused herself as being in a butter for this discussion and for the vote. We have a motion on the floor to make no comment on the zoning board of appeal item on January 19th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll come to the vote. Paul Alpert,
Aye.
Artie Crocker, Natasha Spada.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. We have made no comment. So John, we're done we've dispensed with that item.
All right, thank you. And unless you have anything more for me, I'm gonna go have dinner.
I think that's a good,
Enjoy your dinner.
yes, thank you.
2
What a
minutes.
10. Whoa.
Okay, so, I thank you very much, John. Enjoy your dinner. At this time, we're gonna take a 4-minute adjournment. Do I need a motion to adjourn?
No.
All right.
Just at 9:50, yeah.
Do we put up a slide where adjourned for minutes? We'll reconvene at 10 to 10.
That's one, but how are you?
Can I make one?
Yeah, if you aren't in an urgent situation. Okay, well. No, you go, you go. Just-
Yeah. I represent the Baptist Church.
I'll take care of this. I'm already at.
I have a wife.
So what time are we? having the meeting?
Well.
10, okay.
Why has a new president? The Greater Boston YMCA has a new president. And he has different. What's the word I'm looking for? Priorities. That's it.
I can't hear anybody. Adam,
Okay.
you're muted.
We're not anymore. Can you hear me us now?
Yes. Mhm.
So, yeah, so the Natural Resources Working Group is meeting January 11th, and I believe, Natasha, then the next day, January 12th, is when the full Climate Action Committee is meeting January 12th. So at that point, I mean, we're working through our getting a better understanding of the tree issues in as far as the carbon offset and what we've lost over the past 10, 20 years and so forth. So we're working through that, and then a couple of other issues in town. So that's where we are in our.
So I would,
So I'll tell you, so our committee, in our committee,
I can't hear anything.
you can't,
you hear us now?
they hear us now?
Can anyone hear us?
Can you hear us?
No,
Hi.
no.
I can hear you.
I asked Mark and he says he can.
Alex, can you go over the attendee list?
Lee, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Gene, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Lee, can you hear us now? Lee, your speaker might be turned down or something. I'm gonna send her a text. Lee, I just texted you. Hopefully you can see that. There might be a couple of solutions. Lee, testing 1, 2, 3. Lee, can you hear us? All right. Well, good thing this is recorded.
We
I could call her.
don't have Lee's
Picture
video
either.
either, so I think Lee just might be turned off.
My text.
Her mute is, she's not muted.
I know, but
I don't have any signal here, so I don't think I can call her.
Let me see. My phone's
put
about-
it on
my
Wi-Fi.
phone's about to die.
Might be able to follow.
I think
You
it's
calling her,
already
Paul?
sent
Yeah, it's a problem.
Oh, I can hear
Oh,
you now.
is
it.
it? I
We could hear her
hear.
before.
Oh, we don't.
But she can't hear us.
So can someone call her and just put her on speakerphone,
Oh,
please?
My phone's doesn't have a charge, doesn't have enough charge for staying speaker.
Yeah,
I'm trying to call her right now.
Hello?
Oh.
I can't hear anything.
Can you mute yourself? A second. Okay. Can you hear us?
I can't hear you through the video.
No, but you
No,
can
but you
hear
can
us
hear us
here.
now.
Yes, I can hear you through the phone.
Okay, so my text is not going through, but we have no video on you. So there may be an issue on your end, but the point is you can hear us, so that's good.
Jean can hear us, so I think
We're all good.
it's your computer.
So I wanted to chat now about some climate action comments. Already just mentioned that his crew and the larger climate action plan is meeting on the 10th and 11th or 12th.
11th and 12th.
And I think so we're with the group and Lee is part of it and so is Oscar Mertz, Dave Roche and Justin Savignano. And we are the zoning working group. And so we're meeting this Friday from 1 to 2. This is our and this is our third meeting. And so we have some zoning group recommendations at the moment that we're going to review this Friday. And I can just, there are only 5 of them and I could just, can I just say that?
Yes,
out loud?
please.
The first one is to modify zoning for ground mounted and rooftop solar system installation for commercial, municipal, multifamily buildings. This include heat pumps and energy efficiency systems. The second one is to modify zoning for rooftop solar installation for single family residential buildings, which should be different than multifamily or commercial.
What's required now? Is a special permit?
No, for residential solar, there's nothing required. We just go get a permit.
A
There's
building
nothing.
permit.
Yeah. What was the thought of changing?
Lee, there was no, it's just to make sure that review ease of permitting online and creating different fee structures.
Mhm.
Creating definitions, setbacks and approvals, review process. Review stormwater bylaw for recharging
Yeah.
and incentivizing net zero homes.
How about something for allowing by right the car, structures over parking lots?
Well, that's the first one. So that's modify zoning for ground mounted and rooftop solar systems installation for commercial, municipal, multifamily. And that's review opportunity of sites. So looking at different
So
sites,
including parking lots.
right?
structures like
Review
that.
ease of permitting and creating different fee structures. Creating definitions, setbacks and approvals and review process, and then reviewing stormwater bylaw for recharging as well.
Mhm.
So they're two separate because one is for single family, the other one is for all other buildings. The third thing we talked about was, so those two are kind of low hanging fruit, is what we thought. The third one is planning board to coordinate with MBTA communities and CAPC work and amend rules and regulations for applications with information on resilience, environmental impacts, parking, transit and transportation, and equity impact.
So not making it a requirement of the special permit process yet.
It's creating, it's having that information in the application.
Right. I think that's good. We also need to do that, by the way, with diversity, equity and inclusion.
Well, we said equity impact,
Well done.
so we included it there. The
Right.
number 4 is to create townwide master plan for climate strategies. So we're seeing this as a bigger piece.
Yeah, which is not really, how
Right.
would the planning board affect that?
Well, we're saying create strategies for commercial, municipal and residential,
No, but
single
for
and
the master
multifamily
plan.
buildings. This is the master plan.
Oh, sorry.
Review building codes and stretch code existing and new requirements. Review electric and electric ready buildings. Reporting for greenhouse gas inventory and emissions to set goals for 2050. Reduction for the 2050 reductions, and then green roofs for new construction. So we're trying to create, the master plan is a bigger ordeal that needs to be reviewed, but the other 3 are things that we can do right away if we
Right.
agree upon how do we. And then the fifth one is the big house impacts, because Dave Roach was in the big house, and I'm not sure if Lee, if you were on it also.
Yes,
Big
I
house.
was.
And so that was a 2-year process. So it's thinking about tree bylaw, stormwater, electrification of systems, town resources, recycling, waste management, and passive house. Yeah, so the first 3 seem like it's something that we can do right away. The other 2 need either additional resources or additional thought that go into it. So we came up with this group. We're gonna have some peer reviewers. I have two colleagues, Andrea Love from Payette, and from BR+A, Jacob Knowles, who have agreed to come this Friday to review what we've done. They're kind of leading experts in sustainability and climate change nationally, really. And so they're going to come to our meeting to review these recommendations and see if they're seeing other things happening in other towns that we should review, such as should we have, some maybe municipal buildings, should they be LEED certifiable, not LEED certified, but certifiable? Like, what should we be doing with these things? And so I thought we got to a good place.
For new construction or existing or both?
We don't know. I mean, it's just a matter of like, we just want to see what peer locations are doing, but I think that has to be done with the larger townwide master plan for climate strategies, rather than the planning board just coming up with these things. But we do think that the first 3, which is the rooftop solar systems for, single family and municipal and bigger buildings, commercial, municipal, and the application regulations for application should be modified, and that those feel like low hanging fruit at the moment.
So the modifying the application to gain more information about climate resilience, equity, and these other items. Does that require another zoning bylaw change, or can that just be done administratively or procedurally?
That can be done administratively through the planning board. You're making an amendment to your site plan regulations. I think just to change basically what you're requiring on your application. We can probably do that through I'll check with Chrissy, probably through a hearing process, and then basically adoption of a revised set of regulations, which would require that be part of the application package.
So then we would focus for May on the top 2.
On the top 2, and I sent this to everyone. I mean, we had a public meeting anyway, the last meeting. I sent the meeting notes, which is basically
Can you
this,
please resend this?
to everyone right after the meeting on.
Or send it to Alex and Alex
No,
can actually
yeah,
resend
and
it.
I can resend it. And then, so next steps is zoning working group members to review the recommendations above and provide revisions and comments. January 6th meeting at 1 to 2. I invited other members to come, and engineers and environmental experts.
I think the zoning changes that are coming out of this are not gonna happen in May. I think they're gonna happen in the fall. It's gonna take time to put together the zoning. It's not gonna happen in the next 2 weeks. So, I mean, I think it's a practical matter. I mean, looking at, the solar installations over parking lots and what the regulations for that are gonna be and how it should be structured in the zoning bylaw. It's something that we should be striving to get done in October.
Can you please, okay, so you meet with me on Friday, right?
Yes,
So Lee,
but I'm gonna. forward this to
next
everyone.
week, on Monday, can you please forward to the board an action plan on what specific actions need to be done?
I think we're talking about creating a framework and writing zoning that's going to allow for solar installations over parking lots. So I think we need to look at how we're going to do that, where we're going to do that, what the setbacks for that are going to be, what the stormwater requirements for that are going to be. I mean, I think that that's a whole process. And over the course of the next 2 weeks, I'm finishing the decision on Coca-Cola. I'm preparing the decision on 50 Central Avenue. And I'm working with Jean on the zoning changes that we talked about tonight on the garages and the ADUs. And that's really what, unless you'll tell me that there's another priority, my priorities are.
Well, one of the things I'd like to do, and we can chat about this maybe offline, is come up with a list like you've just done. And then match it to a timeline, or maybe I'll do that with Alex. And that way I'm clear, so we can shepherd that through for, for fall. Because as you were talking about these things, I'd like us to get comment from, Tom Ryder on stormwater management. And maybe from other town departments to comment on some specific regulations that they would like to see for it to be, for us to put this together, because we're obviously going to need their comments. So
Got a schedule on, what the components are and when we might, and how we'll put, and what the steps would be to put it together to ensure that it can be ready for a fall town meeting.
okay. And then I'm going to continue to canvass some, I think town council and Lee, and I think Alex, we'd also talked about some other process or other changes to clean up the bylaw. But I don't think that we're not ready to be able to do that for May, but there are a bunch of areas that I think we could clean up.
There is.
For fall. Yes, that's the 315. Is that the ADU and the Avery Square Overlay District renumbering?
Right, we can do that quickly this spring and get that done.
So are you gonna write up that language?
Sure, I'll do that. So that would be the third one that Jean and I'll work on that one, and then Jean and I will work on the other two for the next meeting.
Okay, you have anything else? Nope.
Is it, what is it we're speaking of now? The third one? What is it?
The third one,
There
Jean,
a
was
number that was made.
She
We
may not be able
repeated
to.
a section number twice when we added a district, so we need to change a numbering in the zoning. It's
Oh, numbering. Oh, okay.
So Jean, the ADU, I believe, is listed under the zoning bylaw at 3.15.1. But that's also 3.15.1 is the zoning reference for the Avery Square Overlay District.
Oh,
So need a technical change to correct the printing in the bylaw to renumber it. That's all.
Mr. Chair, is there anything that we've ever heard in our bylaws which just make life more difficult for people, business coming in?
Yes.
Really serve no purpose of anything that we can remotely think of. Lee, is there anything we can remotely think of to change to make life easier?
Thanks for asking. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was just talking about.
Yeah. And
There is a
anything else?
list
What else is there? Is there anything else?
of the things we probably should do is invite Dave Roach in and get a
Yes,
list from him
yes,
of some
yes.
things that he's hearing from people that he thinks might be appropriate for us to be looking at.
And we
And
can also
also
talk
some of
to
the
him on,
developers.
we can also talk to him on Friday when we have the public, we're having our meeting and just let him know if he could write up a list. That would be great.
Yeah.
Yes, please do
Right.
that. I
Oh,
talked to him, I mentioned this, to this group. Yes, Lee, Jean, I'm sorry.
yes, something occurred to me that we really should be addressing. And it's that houses are being built behind houses. And there's an example, or maybe two examples on Linden Street. And our building commissioner says, the way our zoning is, there's no reason why he would deny a building permit. It's a situation where it's either in the general residence zone or it's prior non-conforming two-family that is just being rebuilt. And what it is you have a house connected with another house by a breezeway. And the building commissioner says that's fine. I don't think that's what we had in mind with the idea of two-family houses. And so just a little concerned. And recently, remember, we had before us an accessory dwelling unit that was before the zoning board of appeals that was going to be above a garage, connected by a walkway up in the air. And our building inspector said, that's connected to the house. That complies.
We're gonna solve that now.
Yeah, is that something quick that we could address, even this
We're handling
annual town meeting?
No,
Well, I
Adam,
think
we're not really
there's
handling
two
it.
issues. I mean, one issue is the issue of the accessory dwelling unit, which of course we would be, I think, Gene, solving if we're changing the accessory dwelling unit component, because we would be allowing them in an accessory structure by special permit.
But it's not
So
solving,
in a sense, we're regulating them. But the other issue that you raised, I think probably requires a definitional, the addition of a definition as to what constitutes a two-family.
Exactly. Paul has something to say about this.
so on the ADU side of it, we're kicking it down the road because we're saying that you can have an ADU in a separate structure anyway.
Right.
So you don't need the machinations of the breezeway.
Right.
But it doesn't solve the question of what's being raised here, which is, does a breezeway create a connection of two buildings to make it one building, which is what the building commissioner is interpreting a breezeway to be.
Right.
And I don't know about the rest of you, but when I read that decision from the ZBA, where they basically said, well, that's the building commissioner's interpretation, and it's his job to interpret the zoning bylaws, so we're not gonna disagree with him. I read that and I went, excuse me, this doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Breezeway is not a connection.
Well, I've seen a two-family where it wasn't even a breezeway, literally just a little covered roof area, which would allow a car to drive under to go to a garage of the unit. So the only connection was a little roof structure with nothing under it,
Yeah,
just driveway.
and it sounds like the building commissioner would say, yeah, that's one structure.
So this is an item that we'll have to pick up with Dave Roach, get clarity on. And Natasha, I'm pointing the finger at you because you might have some specific guidance for us from a design point of view of what's regarded as a distinct, structure. And might be able to come up with some more specific objective criteria for that. But this is definitely something to add. Gene, thanks for raising that. There are others. I also want to bring in the attorneys that are commonly in front of us that have some challenges with some parts of the bylaw. Am I correct? Did I see that there may be another desire to bring back to town meeting the question of rezoning to SRB that strip of housing on Greendale, kind of near the Kendrick area. Did I see that?
Is that coming back?
That is in the housing plan as simply something requiring further study. It wasn't considered to be something that, required immediate action. So we kind of put it aside a little bit, but it is something that should be addressed. And there's actually three strips along Hunting and Greendale that is similar in that regard. And then there's an area up off Brookside Road, I think, going up toward Wellesley, that is similar. So yes, that should be addressed. But the housing plan calls it out, but not as a high priority item.
Okay, so, we'll have to look at that as well. We didn't really have any minutes that kind of came in just a little on the tardy side, so I don't know if anyone's had a chance to review them. I did, but we can punt that to the next meeting to approve unless you just want to take a motion.
We didn't send that out to anybody.
So we can't even do that, right? So that brings us to reports. Lee, do you have any reports for us?
I just wanted to remind everybody, Jean's been working really hard with Karen and the rest and Natasha to finalize and finish the housing plan. I'm going to put it on your agenda for the next planning board meeting. I'd like to have the board have reviewed it and actually vote to accept the plan. We're going to be doing something very similar with the select board. The action plan is due to DHCD, which is basically our plan of how we're going to meet the MBTA guidelines and our timeline to do that. And one of the things they ask in that document is whether we have an approved housing plan. And as I'm filling out the form, I want to be able to answer that question, yes. That plan is actually due the end of January, so I'm working on that currently. So that's the big thing that's on my radar for the next meeting. In addition to the two decisions we have that are in play, one is for Coke and one is for the property at Central Avenue, and of course, the zoning changes we talked about tonight.
Okay. Then we're and 100 West comes back to us in February, the beginning of February.
That's correct.
Okay. Anyone else have any other comments or questions or reports? At this time, I should say for correspondence, lastly, I do note that there is an interesting exchange between a resident of town, Joe Matthews, and Dave Roach that was included in our packet that related to floor area ratio for housing for single families, I think. That was between, yes, SRB for December 9th, between December 19th and December 27th. So we have that. Now I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll come to the vote. Paul Alpert,
Aye.
Artie Crocker, Natasha Spada,
Aye.
Jean McKnight.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all. Good night.
Great.